Very well. The debate continues on Senator Farnham's amendment to the Second Amendment brought by Senator Gorst. And next listed to speak, I have the Conatapa Sundwam.
Thank you, sir. So we've had a number of debates on the subject of electoral reform during my time in the Assembly. I too was pleased when we finally agreed the changes we did last December. However, I've consistently supported the role of Senator on each occasion. I've spoken on this subject, and I do so today. I think, however, if the Assembly reject the position of Senator on this occasion, then we must accept that and put this matter to bed. However, like the Constable of St Brelard, I've had a number of representations from parishioners. I feel duty-bound to represent these today in this debate. Under the current system of ministerial government, the office of Senator has an all-island mandate to undertake the very senior roles in government, such as Chief Minister, and indeed other ministerial roles. And indeed, senior chairs within scrutiny, which by their nature are all full-time and leave very little time to deal with individual islanders' concerns. I'm not suggesting that senators do not get involved in individual issues, because they do. But the point is that electors realise that in voting for senator, they're probably voting for a potential member of the government at a senior level, who will be fully occupied with their role and have very little time to be involved in issues that should rightly be the remit of the Constable or the parish deputy under the current system, and the new district deputy under the new system, which I feel confident we will vote through today. Conversely, these new deputies will have to pick up a great deal more local issues in their district that would undoubtedly eat into their time and ability to take on senior government and scrutiny roles, which will require fulfilling. Furthermore, when the Chief Minister speaks about island-wide policies, he speaks in the knowledge that he has a mandate for the whole island. This is true of all ministers who are senators. However, our system is not perfect. I accept that we have both deputies and indeed constables who are ministers too, which in the purest sense, of course, is flawed. My argument about senators could be countered by pointing to the UK and highlighting that MPs are elected by constituency. One of their number goes on to be Prime Minister. Indeed, all government roles are filled by MPs. My counter to this is in the UK has party politics. So when you vote for an MP, aside from the individual's policies, you know the national mandate you are supporting. And we know, apart from the two new parties, and well, when I say new, one of them is new and reformed, we do not really have party politics yet in Jersey. And aside, this brings me to another issue. Much has been made of voter apathy. Now I've accepted this proposition will, at a stroke, resolve this issue. As I've said before, and this is not my view, I'm convinced that part of the reason for voter apathy is that voters are not sure what they're supporting when they vote for a candidate, or indeed whether they can achieve what is in their mandate if they do actually read the mandate and support it. Our current government is made up of independent members, aside from the two parties, one of which of course is embryonic, which in a number of cases have widely diverse views on the way forward. In my view and short experience, this is not a recipe for quick progress. A common agreed approach from a government with pre-agreed party policies could achieve much more progress in a shorter period of time. The state has a reputation for underachieving, which in turn breeds apathy. For example, why vote? And most people think that nothing is actually going to change anyway. For example, whether you support reform's views, which as they know I don't, largely all their candidates have the same mandate, and they're consistent in trying to achieve it and support each other in doing so. In short, voters know exactly what they're going to get for their vote, and they know that they will all be working together to achieve this. For me, this is a pointer for the future for Ireland politics, and I hope more members are inspired by the reform example and grasp the nestle of forming parties in getting to the stage where we have a party-led government. This may well in turn help with the uncontested election issue, which is not entirely confined to constables, as 3 deputies were returned unopposed at the last election. However, hopefully the new deputy system will stop this. As to be successful, any party is going to need to maximise its return on elected members and to contest every single seat that's available. Anyway, I digress. Back to senators. I believe we need some members with an all-island mandate to take the top government role. And the issues which this greater member can, in my view, be fixed in other ways. Babies and bath waters come to mind. I'm acutely aware that we have settled this issue the last time round. However, since I've received many representations from my parish urging me to keep senators, and the only reason which keeps coming up is how can we have a chief minister who's only elected by a district, not a Northern Ireland mandate. I should also add that the PPC parish meeting that was held in St Wands, it was made very clear to all present that the parish strongly supported the role of the senator. Indeed, there was a very strong majority in the vote that was taken. And actually, they would like to see their ranks restored to 12. And from a St Wands perspective, you can see their point. Under the original system, St Wands parishioners had the choice of voting for 14 members of the Assembly, 12 senators, 1 deputy, and of course the connétable. Under the current system, they can vote for 10. Under the proposed new system, if senators aren't included in this falls to 4, with the prospect of in the new districts that 3 of this number could not have direct links with the parish. And of course, their question is that actually an improvement in their representation? This proposition, in my view, retains the benefit of what we have already agreed, and I wholeheartedly support. But with the small addition of senators, keeps our senators too. I don't think it wrecks the proposition, but it merely enhances it, and it has my support. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Connétable. The Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I've always said that if there was to be a single representative from my parish, then that should be the constable, and that I would vote myself out of office in order that my constable could continue to represent me as my parish representative. And I think islanders value that parish representation hugely. I think they also think that the constable should be the person who takes the view forward. So I say to the constables, those who would wish to retain the senators, and the islanders want you to keep up that parish representation, but we have to make progress and we need more equality. I really hope so that we're going to make some progress today, but in order to do that, as has already been said by some, we need to compromise. We all have to give up something. We all have to give up something we cherish, something we value, and we have to put the fear of change behind us. And what I've heard in some of the recent speeches is the fear of change. But we must not fear change. We must make progress, and we must try much harder to get better equality for islanders when it comes to voting. And those words are quoted directly from Hansard. They're the speech that I made back in December. And I say to members, I am not one for changing my mind. I'm determined my constable will represent me as my parish representative. I don't fear super constituencies. I want to make progress on voter equality, and I won't be voting for either of the amendments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Senator Pallett.
Thanks, sir. As members might expect from someone who carefully considers decisions that he takes and is not someone who changes his mind in a whim, I'm not going to support either the amendment of Senator Gorst or Senator Farnham. I understand both senators' passion, but I would have thought that both, especially Senator Farnham, would have looked back at the debate on P139/2020 and realised that this Assembly wanted change. And part of that change was the move to 2 types of member from 3. As has been said, Senator Farnham's amendment in December was heavily defeated, 43 votes to 3. During this debate, at times I've been dismayed, disappointed, and frankly at times annoyed by some of the comments made by some members as they try to justify overturning the decision the States Assembly made in December last year. Did any member not understand what we were debating with P139/2020? Well, I certainly hope not, as I don't believe the media, including social media, who covered the debate and the run-up to the debate were in any doubt as to what was being proposed within P139. Are we really to believe that the public were in some way hoodwinked or sidestepped in regards to the electoral changes put forward in P139? Well, I don't believe that's the case. And to even suggest that proposals agreed within P139 were sneaked in under the radar, it's just not true. And frankly, it's absurd. It's quite often said that the future of this island lies in the hands of our younger generation. Those that are either currently in education, learning about life, our political system, those that are in the workplace, maybe building businesses or careers, considering starting a family, bringing up children of their own, or just trying to survive in an island where housing is so expensive and the cost of living crippling. Are our younger generation engaged in politics? Do they understand our political system? What about our electoral system? Do young people find it mystifying? Are we listening to young people? And what can we do to encourage more young people to take an interest and particularly stand for election? Are we dealing with these issues? I suggest the answer to that is no. Einstein is widely credited with saying the definition of insanity, and I'm sure most of you will know the quote, is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. We can't carry on with the same electoral system in Jersey and expect better results. It's insane not to change. Young people, if you talk to them, find our system too complex and in their eyes far too difficult to break into. We have to break that mould. There should be fair opportunity for all when it comes to standing for election, irrespective of the position you stand for. Can anyone stand for senator? Well, yes, they can at present, although the Constable Sir Mary believes we should discriminate against the vast majority of the electorate on the grounds they're not already a states member. From someone who stood as a senator at the last election, I have no doubt that financially standing as a senator is beyond the reach of many. Spending £8,000–9,000 on an election campaign rules out many. And frankly, if you're not prepared to commit, you are not going to get elected. That's unfair. And moving to smaller equal size districts levels up the playing field and doesn't take away 8 seats in this assembly that many simply couldn't afford to stand for. I don't know how many times I've been asked, what does a Conotab do? Generally, it's from younger people, including those in their 30s and 40s. And this is not a dig at the constables, because I think they do a fantastic job. I was one. But those people simply don't understand that the role is a dual role, both within the states and outside within the parish. We've heard party politics mentioned several times today. There are now 2 parties in this island. The Progress Party is the new party. And we endeavour, I think in coming weeks and months, to take away any myths around standing for election as a Conotab. We simply should not have 10 or 11 uncontested constables elections next year. And to avoid this, I and others will clearly try to explain that dual role and clearly set out how many in our community, both men and women, are perfectly capable of running a parish, any parish. Being part of the States Assembly should be no different if you are a Conotab, a deputy or a senator. So what exactly holds back islanders from standing as Conotab in their parish? I can assure the Conotab of Sir Mary that political parties are here to stay. And again, the Progress Party will clearly show the public that any scaremongering around being a Conotab and a member of a political party is totally unfounded and needs to be dismissed. Returning to young people and islanders more generally, if we truly want an assembly that is representative of our community, then we have to reduce the hurdles in the way of progress if we really can't alleviate them altogether. To start this process, we must support the changes put forward within P139, and again we're discussing today, as it simplifies a system that many don't understand and frankly are suspicious of, and will provide an opportunity for more islanders to stand for election, which hopefully will address uncontested elections. This assembly is not and should not be seen as a select club that only the elite few can join. As a party and as its interim leader, we desperately need to engage the public more widely in the run-up to the next year's election and convince every islander that their vote matters. I've met so many people recently who have said to me that they will not vote again, as politicians never do what they say and never deliver on manifesto promises. Have we really sunk that low? I understand their frustration, but the failure of politicians to deliver as an assembly of 49 individual States members is an issue that we need to address, and one that I and my colleagues see best addressed through the growth of party politics. Entering the assembly with a group of elected politicians after an election with a shared manifesto, well researched and funded, has to be a step forward from the current situation where 49 individual politicians turn up with 49 wish lists they frankly have no idea how they can deliver on. Sir, this debate, and in fact my speech, has been wide-ranging, but certainly it's been an experience. Last December, I was confronted with proposals that were not completely to my liking, but like many members, I was prepared to compromise. I still am. Being a member of a party teaches you the ability both to compromise and to accept democratic decisions taken by a wider group. I respect the decision that was taken last December, and I will support those decisions. To be clear, I've got nothing against an island-wide mandate, be it for senators, deputies or any other title. But that was not on offer last December, nor is it on offer today. Jersey generally doesn't like change, but we've already agreed this. So rather than lower the respect that islanders have for politicians in this island, please, let's just get on with this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir, and it's a pleasure to follow Senator Pallett. Made some very good points, sir. It probably came as quite a surprise the way I voted last December when I voted to support the proposed changes. But really, it shouldn't have come as any surprise if anybody had read my manifesto, because I did indicate in the manifesto of 2018 that I was up for change. And I think, like all organisations, they need to change. You just cannot stand still. And I think, you know, the previous elections, the poor turnout, etc., really did point to something needing to be done. And I was more than happy, you know, with a great deal of consideration before I pressed that button, you know, to support what was on the table. I did indicate in my manifesto that I am very in favour of an island-wide mandate, and I think Guernsey have proved that it can be done. I did suggest that, you know, 37 senators, 12 constables going forward should be perhaps something that very shortly we should consider as an assembly. Whether it's, you know, the 2026 election or the 2030, I think it would be a reality that will be on the table then. I'll be surprised if it isn't, sir. I am a supporter and a staunch supporter, and always have been, of the parish system. Going extremely well with my parish constable. I try to attend all the parish hall meetings or assemblies, and I get on very well with the parish deputies. And of course, Sombrilla going forward will remain pretty much intact. But the big allure, what attracted me to what is being proposed is the simplicity. It's the creation, most importantly, of a level playing field, that everybody will stand at the next election with the same opportunity, equal opportunity to be elected. And that in a democracy, sir, I think is absolutely everything. And it's something that, you know, we should grasp while we've got this opportunity. So I've been, you know, asked if, you know, I have considered, but this deputy, sir, is not returning. Sir, I believe the change is long overdue, and I urge other members to reject both these two amendments. And I rest my case there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable Centelio.
Thank you, sir. Listening to my good friend, the Constable of St Mary, I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. He suggested that his parishioners are worried about the democratic deficit. He did at least describe them as astute, and I think anyone is astute who moves to a parish where their vote through their constable has approximately 10 times more power than someone who lives in St Helier when I press my pour au contre or abstain button. The fact is, sir, and I want to bring the Assembly back to this, and several speakers, including Deputy Truscott, have reminded us of this. These reforms are essentially designed to bring in a system whereby our voting power as electors is based on the population of the parish in which we live. And a number of members have talked about the attraction of possibly having many senators. The Constable of St John, in an excellent speech, 2 excellent speeches in his first 2 days in office, one has to say, is a very impressive start. But the Constable of St John said that he would be happy to have perhaps 36 senators and the constables. And the problem about doing that is that the inequity created by the constables staying in the States will not be challenged by having the rest of the members being elected by the island, because that disparity that I started off by talking about, particularly in St Mary, but in other rural parishes as well, will persist, and it would only be a matter of time before the position of the constables in the Assembly would become untenable, because critics both at home and abroad would say, how can you have a unicameral system where some members have more power than others? So this, what PPC have brought forward, is a system with the larger consistencies that allows that democratic deficit caused by population to be addressed by having more deputies in certain districts. And if there wasn't a problem with adding senators, I suppose I could support it, because if the equity of our voting was not affected, if Senator Gorst and Senator Farnham weren't proposing to take away these deputy seats that have been brought in to try to address the inequity, then one could probably live with the notion of senators, though of course it would remain an anomaly. We would still get situations where possibly none of our senators would be given the job of chief minister. There is no guarantee that just because someone has a democratic on island-wide mandate, the Freudian slip, I call that democratic, and of course that is not the panacea for democratic values in Jersey. But there's no reason to suggest that a senator should get a particular ministerial position. And indeed, we've seen that happen ourselves in the last few years. People who at the senatorial hustings say they want a particular job, when they set out their stall in front of the Assembly, when it comes to choosing our ministers, sometimes find that there's another member who has a better stall that the members believe will make them a better minister. And as I say, sir, it's illusory to think that senators are always going to have the top jobs. It's an interesting title, it's a nice concept, but so long as it challenges the very bedrock of democracy, which is voter equity, I cannot support it. And I would urge members to realise this. It's been somewhat depressing, so listening to some of the speeches that have obviously been written beforehand. Deputy Labby, for example, gave a superb speech where he set out very clearly what the issues are, only to be followed by a number of speakers who presumably weren't listening, because what they said went quite against the arguments, the very rational arguments that Deputy Labby was making. So I've asked the Assembly many times to deal with a situation whereby the states of Jersey is effectively gerrymandered. It is not a situation that can continue. If we continue to dodge the issue, there is no doubt that outside observers will challenge our system of government, and they will say, how can you claim in the 21st century to be a representative democracy when you clearly are missing the point when it comes to voter equity? So I would urge members to stick with the decision we made in December. Further refinements can come, but let us at least have a fair system before we move forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Chief Minister.
I expect there to be a change at the end of this debate, at the end of these series of debates. And that change that I expect is that the Assembly will be introducing super constituencies. And that will be a significant step forward. And it is a compromise, or will be a compromise, for a number of people who haven't supported them in the past. And therefore, whatever happens, there will be a change, in my view. And the question therefore should be revolving around the senators and essentially a small tweak to the numbers in relation to the deputies. And actually, and I'm going to be focusing mainly, sir, on the senators as far as I possibly can. But I do agree, actually, with the Conotaf of St Helier. I often agree with the Conotaf of St Helier in certain areas, but he may not support my agreement in this context, because I think actually there have been some comments that have been somewhat depressing, and also agree with the spirit of his comment that essentially, if senators go, I consider, in my view, that the Conotafs will be gone in the next assembly. The reason I say that is because by that point there will be a significant number of deputies, and people will say, well, why do we not go down to a single member? And for me, that's when people know my stance on that one. I do sometimes rather feel, sir, that I should be applying to Durrell as a member of a species that is about to become extinct, but we will see what the outcome of the vote is going to be. What I did want to pick up on, sir, is some of the comments that have been made and challenge some of the, well, challenge actually the comments which I think are unsubstantiated. Number one, the public are not supportive of an increase in states members, which is interesting. And the reason I refer to that, sir, is that I can't remember who said it, was that Senator Gorst, in his very good speech at the very beginning of this whole series, made reference to the work that the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel did in 2017 when I chaired it, which was we looked at the electoral reform proposals that were being made at that time. We didn't have very long to look at it in the time we were given, but we did run a Murray poll. And at the end of the day, for me, a Murray poll is one of those statistically significant surveys that one can do that actually does give you evidence. And that evidence, and I think it's worth making two remarks. I'm kind of working backwards in importance. One, we actually asked the question at the time, was that, and it was a yes/no type of answers that we would be given, or how it's split. And the question was, the number of states members could increase a bit if this led to a more even distribution of number of voters per elected deputy. And actually, the feedback from that statistically representative sample, and from memory, it was 1,000 to 1,200 islanders, split again by age, general diversity across the parishes, all that type of thing, was 37% versus 38%. So there is not a clear level of evidence that the public are not supportive of an increase in members. But I just wanted to challenge that point. It is not actually, and that is not anecdote, sir, that is evidence-based. The other point, I think, which also comes back to this, the scenario we face as states members as a whole. And sir, I hope this is within the bounds of debate. If it isn't, I apologise. But if, sir, I was to say to you on a daily basis, sir, you look tired. Are you feeling well? I hope you're okay. For perhaps 2 or 3 months, I would suspect that even if you're feeling absolutely wonderful at the beginning of that time, sir, that 3 months down the line, you would actually be feeling pretty awful. If, on the other hand, every day, sir, I come to you and say, actually, sir, you're doing a really good job and I think you're looking great, hopefully at the end of those 3 months, you would still be feeling fairly buoyed up. And the reason I say that, sir, is the comment has been made on a number of occasions that the public don't understand our system. And I'm going to be critical here, sir, of, and it's not this PPC or the previous PPC, it's PPC in general, probably for the last 15 years. What has actually been done, other than the really good work by the States GREF with the Year 5s, with the Youth Assembly, etc., i.e. people of school and student age, what has actually been done to islanders, particularly new people who move to the island, to actually explain our existing system and the benefits from it? Because if we talk up the system and people understand its positives, it can't then necessarily be targeted. Yes, every system has difficulties, every system has its negatives, but there has been no effort really, sir, concerted on a considered and frequent basis to explain the system that we presently operate. Second comment, sir, is that there's been no pushback, sir, from islanders on the reform process that's being suggested. Now, I'm racking my brain here, sir, but I can't really imagine what could possibly be distracting islanders and the public from 100% focus on what the deliberations are of this assembly, particularly around Christmas and January of last year and this year. Might be the fact that we've been in the middle of a pandemic for the last 12 months and more, that actually they've been worried about their health, about losing loved ones, possibly about their jobs. I rather suspect that electoral reform has not been at the forefront of their minds. And I think that goes back to the point again, sir, about talking about ourselves at the right and opportune moments. I do take the view that the senatorial role is the most democratic role that we have, and I fail to understand remotely the arguments that it is not, because each vote that a member of the public makes towards their choice to senator is directly proportionate to the total of the electorate, and it cannot be distorted in any shape or form. And actually, as an aside, sir, yes, the hustings for senatorial role do need improvement, but actually, I believe over the life of the, I think, 14 hustings that we faced in 2018, we faced between 50 and 70 questions from memory, and that's excluding obviously all the social media and other engagement that we had. Just to comment as well about a public understanding of what we do, and I know the States Gref is hopefully going to be initiating something at some point for States members, and we as government are also going to be implementing something to explain the roles of what we all do and what government does. So some of that communication can be addressed, but I do take the point, as far as I'm aware, sir, there's been very little sustained explanation of what our electoral system is and how it works. I also make the point, which is actually picking up on one or two remarks around, I think it was the 2013 referendum and the option B. And the reason I understand absolutely sincerely the feelings of those who supported option B, but I think again, for the record, it is worth putting on record. And actually, I'm going to quote from the then Senator Ian Lamarcon, sir, from a proposition he brought around that time. The reasons why a number of us could not support the outcome of the referendum, and the nub of it, and there were members of the Reform Party who agreed with it at the time. Option B did not get 50% of the total votes cast. It got close, but it stopped at just over 49% of the 26% who voted. And that basically meant, sir, that less than 13% of the registered electorate were the ones who voted for option B. And that, sir, in my books, is not a mandate for that level of change that was being proposed. And the summary that Senator Lamarcon at the time said, in my view, the most that can be said for option B is that it won a sporting contest. I know this will disappoint the B supporters, but there simply is no mandate for this particular package of change. And that is why the mandate, the option B did not succeed. And again, sir, I make the point, and again, bear in mind, because this is what's the argument's been brought up for removing the senators, is that in the Mori poll that we ran back in under the Corporate Services Review that we did at the time, one of the questions asked was, I want to keep senators in the States. 58% of those surveyed agreed. 75% had little or no knowledge of the proposals that were being made at the time. And perhaps the most stunning, well, the most clear outcomes of the result, irrespective of whether one supported or did not support the proposals at the time, the population polled, 71% of them, 71% of between 1,000 and 1,200 those surveyed, supported a referendum on the proposals, and 87% felt there should be far greater communication from the states on such measures. And we have simply not done that, sir. Obviously, the pandemic will be part of it, but I think the other point to make within a referendum, sir, and this is to quote directly from a UN website on the Venice Commission, said the question submitted to the electorate must be clear, it must not be misleading, it must not suggest an answer, and most particularly, sir, voters must answer the questions asked by yes, no, or a blank vote. And that was also not possible out of the options that were there. And that's when I said I supported a referendum, it must be a yes, no answer, sir. So for all those sort of reasons, sir, I do not consider that we have a mandate to remove the most democratic role in this, that the electorate can vote for. And I do believe that I'm always open to being proved wrong, but I do believe we will be challenged and we will be criticised if we do not maintain the senators, given the circumstances that we are in at the moment and given the lack of ability of the public to have a say in removing their ability to vote on an island-wide mandate basis. I think the other points, sir, that come through, reference has been made for it. The people who said there is no direct requirement for the Chief Minister to be a senator, I absolutely do agree with that. But also the proposals unamended will create 9 districts. And what that will mean, sir, in reality, on the basis that every Chief Minister to date has been a senator, is that only 1/9 of the island will have voted for whoever becomes Chief Minister under the present system, sir. And I don't consider that that would be an improvement in the position of democracy on the island. I'm getting an echo, sir.
Yes, I was just about to remark on that, Chief Minister. We can hear you, but there is, I see I'm echoing as well now.
Somebody else in the room. I think you've probably got another device in the room. It's got a live sound.
Yes, is everybody clear in the room that their microphone is switched off?
His room.
And also in your room, Chief Minister, is there anyone with an open microphone in your room, or?
Anything I've got is muted, sir.
Right. Well, if members could check that they are otherwise switched off in the microphone, and if you'd like to continue, Chief Minister.
Okay, thank you, sir. What was I going to say? Sorry, apologies, sir. Having just lost my flow there, sir. But what I was going to say, sir, is that in a system of generally independent individuals, which is what we presently have, senators are the ones that provide the direct link between the electorate and the Chief Minister. And that certainly has been true, sir, for all the positions to date. I shall be interested to see what the reaction will be. That, as I said, when in reality only 1/9 of any proportion of the electorate will be able to vote for a future Chief Minister. There are some minor points that have also been made, sir, one of which being that I think the PPC comment is an inequality of arms with regards to campaign expenditure. I would make the point, sir, that by moving to everybody roughly at 10,000, whilst I accept that it will be cheaper for those who've run for senator to run within a super constituency, actually for those in individual parishes, the barriers will have got harder because they will need to run a campaign for an electorate of 10, 11,000, sir, rather than potentially less at what they have at the moment. And so therefore I would suggest that the barriers, there are all sorts of arguments around the barriers to being able to stand. And I think the final comment, sir, which is a relatively minor one, is that I know Deputy Martin has always referred, and frequently always refers to what my constable has said, i.e. to the Constable St Helier, because she has great admiration for him. But it will be interesting, sir, because there will be a number of representatives from districts who will not be able to say that any longer after the next year, presumably, because obviously they will not have a single constable. Because they will be representing more than one parish. But anyway, sir, really to sum up, I think some of the arguments that have been used have been at best, well, I will say spurious. I think, sir, that the argument that people don't understand the system is actually the fault of ourselves, and the fact we do not engage the public sufficiently to explain what we do. I think the fact that people tried to claim...
I'm sorry, Chief Minister, I have to ask you to stop. That's your 15 minutes.
Well, in which case, sir, I'll be supporting the 2 amendments from Senator Farnham and Senator Gorst. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I think Deputy Young had a clarification. I don't know if you want to take that first. It just popped up on the
Deputy Young, was that a point of clarification from the Chief Minister?
Yes, please, it was, sir. I think I wanted to check that I heard the Chief Minister correctly. He said that only 1/9 of the members will be able to vote for a future Chief Minister in the new states. Would he please just clarify that? Because I think that's an important issue, sir.
Well, essentially, sir, working on the principle that the Chief Minister, there are going to be 9 districts, sir, and obviously only one district will vote for the, and therefore roughly 1/9, only one district will be voting for the successful candidate who becomes Chief Minister, sir.
Yes, but could the Chief Minister just confirm that the Chief Minister is elected by the States Assembly?
That's not a point of clarification, and I don't think
Okay, so I'll draw it. Thank you.
any doubt amongst any of the members of the Assembly.
Yeah, perhaps I could say elect then.
Thank you very much. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Sometimes you do someone a good turn, sir, and say there's a point of clarification. They steal a part of your speech, but never mind. I will start with that. So the reality is that the Chief Minister is elected via this Assembly and a majority of this Assembly, each of whom represents their constituents. That's the way democracy works in just about everywhere around the world, unless you have a direct island-wide election for Chief Minister specifically for that, and we do not. We are not talking about that. So I'm very pleased to Chief Minister, because what I'd like to put back is some of the rational arguments that have been made as we've been through this debate, because there have been some that perhaps I've not perhaps listened and considered those. And what I was hoping is in that the fact that we have to even return to this debate is disappointing. But when we do, please, let's listen to the rational arguments that go with it, some of which are complex, some of which have a number of interlinking parts that have to be considered, but they have to be. I thank Deputy Russell Labby, who I thought put things very well about the equity argument of the senators and the fact that it's the only allegedly democratic way. So that is simply not the case, and I'm not going to repeat, because I know Sir Stanley will say we do not repeat arguments that have previously been made, but I would urge members to think back to the arguments that were made. So I want to address this issue, first of all, of the role of the senator and the notion that there's some sort of primacy of the role. The reality is that our Council of Ministers and the government, the executive side, is made up of the majority of non-senatorial members of this Assembly. And so that reality it effectively destroys the myth that senators are elected for that reason. And in terms of, and I think that's very important. And perhaps what I would suggest is, if everybody who stands for this Assembly considers themselves that they are of the caliber to take on the role of Chief Minister, then perhaps every single member of this Assembly would have the sort of standard that people are looking for in our population for those who stand for this Assembly. And so during the debates in the last few days, I've written down the word, and I've got it in huge letters in front of me, which is good because my handwriting isn't very good and I'm having trouble reading my own handwriting. But the word is leadership. And what we need now is leadership. And so what we're sadly lacking again by revisiting this debate is a lack of leadership. And I go back to what the Chief Minister has just said, and I'm not sort of picking on in any way, it's just the most, it's the thing that was last said. He mentioned that we're in a situation of COVID and we should be considering how we respond to that and the well-being of our island and the issues that surround everybody's lives day to day. And I absolutely agree with the Chief Minister there, and it's very nice to be able to agree with him so wholeheartedly. And that is why we should not be wasting the time revisiting this debate, which was voted on in P139, and now there's a last gasp attempt to try and save the senators is being brought back to us again. And so I would suggest that if we had genuine leadership, what would happen is that the Chief Minister, who represents this Assembly as elected by this Assembly, would take the will of this Assembly, which was 31 votes to 16 in the last vote, and step up and say, I support the will of this assembly, and I will not back these amendments, but I will back what BBC has proposed. That to me is leadership of this political establishment, of this political assembly. And then sometimes I wonder whether that's understood, that there's a role there to be had as well within these, I would say 4 walls, sir, but it's a very rounded wall. I don't know how you describe it. The real change is not simply to change to the size of some constituencies, because some are not changing. I stood in a constituency with 3 deputies represented. My Deputy Lahegre, who's to my left here, stood in a constituency, a huge constituency with 4 deputies. They are not changing massively, only some are. So the major change here is not that. The major change is about equity of representation. And that is so important. As a constituency deputy, I deal with constituents, and I am very pleased to do so because you are close to your constituency. But if somebody comes from somewhere else with an issue that may be considered island-wide, and I'll come back to that notion of island-wide and how we define that, because I'm not entirely sure I know what that means, I won't turn them away. I would try to help, perhaps contact their deputy, or it may be something that's common to so many people across the island that you would be involved in. And so this notion that perhaps as deputies we only deal within the boundaries of our constituency is so fundamentally wrong. And so I have to say, and I would support, particularly because I've worked so closely with them, many members who are new to the Assembly have really thrown themselves into this role and taken on so many things across this Assembly with scrutiny, which has dealt with so many what will be considered, although it's difficult to define, island-wide issues. And you do so in those roles. Anybody who thinks you can walk into this Assembly simply as a deputy and not be involved in certain things, I'm afraid you are going to be very, very shocked when you walk into this Assembly. And so I would remind the government and those who are thinking that the essential nature of senators need to be retained, that so many propositions have been brought in this term by deputies and backbenchers or non-executive members that have been so crucial to what's happened in the driving of this Assembly. Of course, I would mention the proposition regards climate change, which I believe has changed a dialogue a great deal that we've had in this Assembly. I'm not on an island-wide mandate, so how on earth did I manage to think up such a thing? So we do not come in here in isolation. We don't come in here not trying to represent everybody, but we are elected within a certain area. So I think that myth needs to be looked at very carefully, and it needs to be considered very carefully before people feel that they are going to vote to save something which is, to be quite frank, not really there. And so I would like someone to define to me what they mean by an island-wide issue. What would it be? Would it be drainage, because there are drainage within constituencies and there are drainage island-wide? Would it be the sea, because that surrounds us? Would it be the beaches, because they surround us? Would it be green space, because that's everywhere? Would it be traffic? Well, we don't just drive within our own constituencies. And so there is a strange sort of debate going on there about island-wide, which I really don't understand. And this protectionism of that mandate for issues that aren't actually real or are real, but for everybody, seems to me to need to be understood. And it's very confusing, sir. There are a couple of other things I would say as well. So there has been compromise. I thank Senator Pallett for talking about parties. I would say he said there were 49 individual manifestos. There are actually 44 plus 5 of us who stood on a collective manifesto and have tried to pursue that. And indeed, there was a strange criticism of us yesterday for trying to pursue that, which I didn't quite get, but there we go. We'll leave that one behind now. And so he's absolutely correct. As politics develops and as people work together, we do have that collective approach developing. I stood purely because there was a party to stand for, because I felt that was the right thing to do. And I stood because I believe that Jersey is a fantastic place to live, and we have a duty to try and do something about it to keep it that way and make it better. And that is island-wide. Those issues are island-wide. Excuse me, sir. There was a key point that was made about change and the fear of change. And I think that is the case, sir, that sometimes change is not understood or is interpreted in a way that it may weaken what we have. And this notion that it's the psychology of the population that was wrong and not their understanding of procedure, I think is fundamentally wrong. What we have is a real desperate need for people to engage in politics. And the only way we can do that is to simplify our system, make it more inclusive, and make this assembly much more representative of the people that we represent. It has not happened for so long, and this is an opportunity for us to do it. So when I spoke yesterday, I said sometimes life's like a film and it's like Groundhog Day, and we are back in Groundhog Day. But then I thought about it and said, that's not the film that we should be looking at here. Perhaps the film for Senator Gorst and Senator Farnham is Frozen. And to quote from Frozen, let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. The Deputy of Greville.
Thank you, sir. The States Assembly has no mandate to remove the most democratically elected seat in the chamber. It has no mandate. It had no mandate when it removed the original 4 seats in 2011, and it has no mandate to remove the remaining 8 seats today. The so-called referendum, which did not demand a yes/no answer and did not have a minimum percentage turnout requirement, I'm afraid rendered it invalid from the start. It posed options, which according to the Electoral Commission is unheard of: super constituencies with the constables or super constituencies without the constables. The options did not produce a conclusive result for anything, where option A and option C had greater support than option B, indicating that the majority of people voting did not want super constituencies and the constables, which is exactly what we have before us today. This proposition to amalgamate certain parishes into super constituencies and remove 8 senatorial seats is reducing the voting rights and influence of my constituents in Greville from 10 candidates to 4. How can this be a move for democracy? By retaining the 8 senatorial seats gives the public a far greater ability to influence and elect those who serve in their assembly. It is no secret that I would far prefer a greater selection of 12 senators, even 16, to choose from. It gives the public the ability to indicate who they favour in the more senior roles, and they are the more senior roles by dint of the number of the electorate they attract. 500 to 1,500 votes for deputies compared to 10 to 15,000 for senators. But more importantly, it gives the public greater influence and say in who they might favour as Chief Minister. What we do with that result is a debate for another day. Sir, it is no secret that I support the island-wide mandate. I also support maintaining the integrity of the parishes. The island is made up of 12 parishes, not 9 districts. It is who we are. It is part of our island identity. We belong to a parish community, not 2 to 3 districts, depending on how the numbers carve up at a given point in time. It is grossly unfair and demonstrates the total lack of understanding or recognition of the relationship of the deputy in rural parishes. You have only got to look at the voter turnout in parishes like St Mary, which commands 60% turnout, compared to St Helier, which struggles to achieve 35%. Equally, to expect the rural deputies to serve in multiple districts, multiple municipalities, attend 2 to 3 parish assemblies and parish organisations times 2 to 3 that accompanies parish life, yet the urban deputies continue to serve one or part of one parish is unfair. Clothier recognised this and kept the integrity of the parish and the deputies elected in the parish they serve. An issue which hasn't been addressed is that for a new unknown candidate, it is far more costly and cumbersome to canvass a large district of 2 to 3 parishes. The election becomes more akin to a PR exercise rather than the door-to-door personal engagement which people in Jersey like and expect from candidates. And PPC can't have it both ways. They cannot use the argument that people don't vote because they feel disenfranchised, at the same time as advancing the argument that our system is too complicated and people don't understand it. I find this argument insults the intelligence of the public. I could explain the difference in the 3 roles to someone in less than 5 minutes. The issue is the relevance of local politics in people's everyday lives, and that education at home, in schools, and to newcomers to the island. But all members have a part to play in demonstrating the difference in the roles. I would particularly like to see the constables play a greater part in using their parish assemblies to discuss and vote on issues to be discussed in the assembly, making the constable truly representative. This would also help to invigorate parish assemblies and offer debate in local politics at grassroots level. But this whole argument to change our entire system to achieve equal representation and equality of numbers has been lost by the office of constable being retained in the States Assembly. So we should not continue with this fudge of compromise. We should continue with the solution which gives our constituents the greatest number of votes and influence in their assembly, until at least we can table something better. Because if it is voter equity we're after, this is not the option. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. The Deputy St Wom.
Thank you, sir. I wish to speak to refute the suggestion that only the senatorial elections provide an opportunity to discuss island-wide issues. I've fought 3 elections for a seat in the States Assembly, and it's my experience that parishioners want to talk about island issues far more than purely parochial issues. And my experience arises from having knocked on doors, stood outside shops and parish halls and the like, and moved around our community, perhaps more so than the senators do in a public election. I've no doubt the concerns were island-wide. The concerns were population. The concerns were, even if they were talking about speeding outside their own home, isn't it an island-wide issue that road safety is critical in the island, and we have problems of that nature? So deputies might get a helpful local and immediate focus, but it's an island-wide issue nonetheless. So I reject this condescending view that the deputies are perhaps only fit to deal with parochial issues, and that senators are the senior statesmen, or should be regarded as such, and the ones eligible for ministerial office. That should never have become the case, but it perhaps grew to be a way of thinking from 1948, when the jurats were replaced. At the time, the addition to the States Assembly could have been 12 more deputies. But as we are so often finding, there's a fear of complete change. There was a recognition that the judiciary needed to be separated from the political assembly, but there was a fear of a complete change, of moving to an entirely democratic system. The jurats had been influential members of the community, and they were known across the island. They had tended to head major committees. And how could those jurats who wanted to continue in politics possibly sit as mere parish deputies? So the idea was dreamt up that there should be an island-wide mandate. Didn't have to be. And this island-wide mandate, because the jurats were seen as senior statesmen, had to be grander than the deputies. So the first senators were elected, some of them for 9 years, some of them for 6 years, and some for 3, whereas the mere deputies served for 3 terms. And the senators had the option, if they should be unfortunate enough to lose their senatorial seat, they could fight a subsequent deputies election and come back into the States. Before the senators were named as such, before it was decided upon the name to call this new class of state members, they were referred to as the political jurats. So this is a hangover, sir. 70 years on, our island, our politics doesn't need this stratified, hierarchical, outdated and condescending structure. It's just not needed. We are all duly elected state members of equal status. The concept of senior positions and seniority and priority is not the reality in this chamber, or indeed, as many have pointed out, in government. Once deputies are elected in larger districts, those larger districts will always have reference to the parishes. So my parish will be combined with 2 others, but we will nonetheless be parishes. Once elected, the state's members, call them deputies, you could call them senators, you could call them anything else, but they will have been elected to our assembly and represent a population of more than 10,000 people. With that mandate, they can justly claim a comprehensive mandate, which would have got them elected anywhere else in the island. Therefore, no one can any longer say, oh, they wouldn't have got elected if they'd have stood in my constituency or stood in some other constituency. And there will always be elections, as opposed to the failings now where we see members, it's not the failings of members, but it's the failings of the system that we have too many unelected, too many contests that are not contested. So if members like the concept of senators, then those new deputies elected in the larger districts will fulfill a senatorial role. They will represent a large electorate. They will span parish boundaries. They will be just as capable as anyone who might have been elected as a senator. Senators don't become extinct. Senators are a class of state members. We are changing a name. We might say we are removing a name, but the state's members will still exist. All senators can still stand as a deputy in the new constituencies. So senators, please don't cling to a title. Become deputies and do the same job you're doing now, the same job we're all elected to do, which is to represent the island. We are talking about a system to get us to and represent the islands, to do the best for islanders, and do the job we have been doing. To suggest we need to retain the senators because they bring some sense of a greater sense of democracy than deputies might, because they deal with different issues. All of that seems to me to be a falsehood and unnecessary. And it does make the system far more complex. I have stood on doorsteps and tried to explain our system, and I disagree with the Deputy of Greville. It's not easy to do. It's completely outside the experience of so many people, and it's not easy to understand. So I would have to be standing on those doorsteps again and saying, well, we elect 8 members on an island-wide basis and 12 members on a parochial basis. And what about the rest? Well, actually, it's neither island-wide and neither parochial. In fact, it's something in between. There's some parishes are combined, some parishes are not combined. But how complex is that? We have a duty to achieve the greatest voter equity we can in a system that people can engage with. And so I was concerned and upset to hear the constable of my parish say that he had received some representations in the past few days and therefore felt duty bound to vote for these amendments. And I would like to say to my constable, who voted for reform in December, that we have a population of over 4,000 people in our parish. And I'm sure he's not received 2,000 plus representations in the last few days. I've received, I think, 2 by email. Perhaps he's received many more. I don't know. But he won't have received and been able to assess the view of the entirety of our parishioners. And I think he should understand that we don't need to retain this outdated system. If we're duty bound in anything, we are duty bound to move forward and to remove the serious inequalities that exist in our system. No system is perfect, but in December we reached a reasonable compromise which delivered improvements in the system. We did that ourselves. We didn't need that to be forced upon us, as might happen if we continue in our failure. We arrived at a solution which gave greater voter equity, which gave greater understanding and will lead to more engagement, I believe, with our constituents. I hope my constable will stick to the principles that he voted for in December and reject these amendments, as I will, and I would urge all other members to do the same. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Senator Moore, you wish to give notice of a move to close the debate under Standing Order 65? So you'll be making that motion in half an hour's time?
Yes, sir, I will.
Very well. Well, members will notice that that notice has been given. And Constable St Clement.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. And I would like to say how much I appreciated the quality of the speech of the Deputy of St Juan. I even agreed with 1 or 2 of the points that he made, sir. But I shall make a very short contribution because so much has already been said. But what I have to say, sir, that it genuinely, with heavy heart, that I cannot support either the amendment of Deputy Gorst or the amendment to the amendment of Senator Farnham. And not just because we've already made that decision a few months ago, although that should be enough, and not just because, as I said in the last debate on this matter, we must be one of the only jurisdictions, or very few jurisdictions, but the only jurisdiction in the world to have senators, but no Senate, sir. But having decided wrongly, in my view, to move to large constituencies, when you think about it, there's no longer any point. There's no longer any relevance in the island-wide mandate. Every deputy will be elected with a substantial number of votes compared to what happens now in some areas. So, but I predict, sir, nevertheless, that we will come to regret the amalgamation of some of the less populous parishes, as we will see places like St Mary, Trinity, St John, and even St Martin disenfranchised to a degree. And this will be even more important, more noticeable when in the 2026 election, as the Chief Minister has predicted and indicated, there probably be no election for constables. The states will comprise entirely of deputies, and rightly or wrongly, but that will certainly disenfranchise particularly the smaller parishes. So the deputy of Greville said that she respected the integrity of the parishes, as I do. So while I can't support the amendments, I will suggest to her perhaps she might do what I'm going to do and make one last protest about these changes and vote against the substantive Article 1 in any event, so that we can really have another look at this in due course, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Commentator, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to keep it very short, particularly focused on this amendment. I'll leave my thoughts on Senator Gorst's amendment to that debate. I just want to say that, unfortunately, I have to say something about Senator Gorst's amendment. It creates an inequity as far as the parishioners that I represent are concerned, and Senator Gorst's amendment creates a reduction in their representation. And the same goes for St. Juan, St. Peter, St. Mary, St. John, Trinity, Greville, and St. Martin under Senator Gorst's amendment. And so I cannot, in any right mind, as representative of St. Lawrence, a parish that would be adversely affected by Senator Gorst's amendment, I cannot in any way not support Senator Farnham's amendment, because it goes some way to righting that wrong from Senator Gorst. And were Senator Gorst's amendment to be passed and supported by the Assembly, I would have watched an opportunity to stop that inequity happening pass me by. And so it is with that in mind that I will be supporting Senator Farnham's amendment and taking it from there and seeing where that goes. But it's important, I think, that for me, representatives of those parishes that I mentioned are aware of the damage that Senator Gorst's amendment would do to their parishes in terms of their representation. And so I would urge them to think along similar lines to myself as far as this particular amendment is concerned. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Connie Tarp of Trinity.
Thank you, sir. I only tend to speak once in this whole debate, as I find it difficult in situations when we're reopening a recent debate to add much that is new. However, this one is of particular importance to me and the many people who've taken the trouble to contact me over recent weeks to express their despair at the prospect of losing the senators. I said in my speech in December on P139, it was a dreadful day for Jersey when the Assembly reduced the number of senators from 12 to the present 8, removing 4 of the most democratically elected members of this Assembly without a mandate from the people of Jersey. Well, here we are again, asked to ratify a further reduction in democracy by condemning the 8 remaining senatorial seats to the political waste bin. Today, we are back in the last chance saloon, and the opportunity remains for members to wake up and smell the coffee. Is this really the right way forward when the name of the game is supposed to be improving, not reducing democracy? In their comments, PPC say they're dedicated to extending voter turnout and looking at ways of achieving this by simplifying the existing system. Well, I'm sorry to disagree, but I do not see that getting rid of the senators and the change to super constituencies achieving this objective. It's claimed that the people do not vote because they do not understand the system. Do members really think there will be a groundswell of enthusiasm and a sudden upsurge of interest in local politics just because we've had yet another tinkle with the electoral system? I just don't see it. I'll take the opportunity to say that I will reluctantly support the proposed change to the date for the elections in 22 because I fear the impact it will have on our national day. But I do think that it is, again, another example of unintended consequences of continual tinkering with the electoral system. The issue of conflict with our Liberation Day should have been identified when elections were moved from the autumn to the spring, again on the pretense of increasing voter turnout, and we know how successful that was. I will be supporting both of the amendments, but it remains highly unlikely that I will support the substantive main proposition if it remains unamended. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colonel Tarbes. Senator Ferguson.
Yep, sorry, sir, I've lost my mouse. We've had all sorts of people saying that no one can understand our system. I consider that this is so supercilious and condescending that I'm appalled. I find our youngsters a great deal smarter than their contemporaries suggest. You know, even the blue-collar workers understand the voting system in the US. So why people think that our youngsters can't understand our system, I have no idea. As I say, I think it's highly insulting. And I won't be supporting any of this revision stuff because I think it's rubbish. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment to the amendment? No other member wishes to speak. No other members to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Senator Farnham to respond.
Thank you, sir. And can I thank all members that have spoken? We've had some really good speeches, sir. We've had some rhetorical speeches, sir, and we've had opinion expressed as facts. We've probably had some facts expressed as opinions, sir. So it's been very interesting. I will try to address the substance of my amendment, which was adding 3 deputies, sir, to the mix. And I have still quite a bit to say about the island-wide mandate, which I'm going to obviously keep to until Senator Gorst's amendment is debated. And can I just reassure members, sir, that both mine and Senator Gorst's amendments are brought to the Assembly in the spirit of compromise, sir. There's no attempt to do anything other than find a compromise, find a way forward, seek improvements to our electoral system, sir. Although some speakers have contradicted themselves, and I'll perhaps point out 1 or 2 of those examples as we move through, as I move through my summing up, sir. But I'll try and keep it brief, bearing in mind we still have quite a lot to do. Senator Meslick, we always, Senator Meslick and I have taken opposite positions on this consistently, And I felt like I was being both patted on the head and slapped in the face at the same time by the senator. I don't think we'll ever agree on figures, because you can look at the stats, and I'm looking now, sir, at a spreadsheet that I've been working on and shared with other members. And you can present those stats, and you can add and subtract and divide all day and all night and come up with lots of different results. But you can't do that with the office of senator. It's an island-wide mandate, and it is what it is. What I'm trying to do, sir, is just retain some, or put, a little bit more balance in to the mix, provide a slight improvement to Senator Gorst's amendment. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just improve Senator Gorst's amendment, if you'll excuse me for saying that slightly, so we can get a little bit more equity, as a number of members have pointed out, in some of the districts. And with hindsight, perhaps I should have not done that. Perhaps I should have just, rather than try and put more deputies in, I should have just perhaps brought a proposition to restore the numbers of senators from 8 to 12. And with hindsight, sir, and having spoken to a number of members, perhaps I should have done that. And let's just look at the total number of members in the Assembly. Before all this started, we were at 53 members, sir. And then, without the knowledge or the permission of the electorate, the Assembly arbitrarily reduced the number of senators from 12 to 8, taking the number to 49. Senator Gorst wants to reduce it by one further to 48. My amendment would put it to 51, sir. And I don't think there's a huge amount of difference in those numbers between, in relation, in the context of the work the Assembly does. And members will know, all members will know, no matter whether they're engaged with scrutiny or government or both, that there have been times when, even with 49 members, we've been hard pushed to deal with the workload. And I know a number of members have referred to that in previous speeches, and not just today, but in previous speeches on this issue. Deputy Labby, sir, delivered a fantastic speech. His delivery is good. I don't always agree with the content, and he made some rather surprising claims, sir. How can anyone consider the election of senators to be less fair than the other elections? It just does not make sense, sir. And the senatorial and deputy, and I'll come on to that in a bit, sir, but he also compared the hustings. And whilst the deputy hustings are well attended, sir, some better than others, although I've been to some deputy hustings, sir, especially in St Helier, where they're very poorly attended, yet that doesn't always impact on the quality of the questions. They're often very good. You don't need a large crowd to ask good questions. But the senatorial hustings pack parish and public halls there, with a nod to St Martin's, every single time. The chair of PPC, Deputy Alves, and the Councillor of St Martin talked about stats, and I'm trying to recall now. So, oh yes, I think Deputy Alves compared my amendment to the original proposition, which had 37 deputies, whereas I have 31. And looking at the variance of average, sir, which is, it does differ from the original proposition by not by a considerable amount. For example, the average population per deputy in the main proposition is 2,886, and in mine, sir, 3,400. And in Senator Gorst's, I'm trying to just find that figure now, it's a large spreadsheet, it's 3,800. And whilst the percentages might vary from -5, -13 to +10 in the original proposition. In my amendments, they range from -9 to +15. So they're almost as broad as they are long. But my amendment seeks to restore 3 of the deputies that the original that the PPC proposition has in place. I don't quite understand how members can criticise that when I'm actually putting back some of the deputies to mirror what they originally proposed, which indicates it's their way or the highway. They're not prepared to compromise on their original proposition, which I find disappointing. I think, I'm not sure if the Constable of St Martin that said we shouldn't change the number of deputies without considerable careful thought and consultation. But of course, we're happy to get rid of the 8 senators, sir, without applying that standard to it. I think the Constable of St Mary clearly articulated the views of his parishioners, and a number of members have spoken about the loss of influence in the country parishes. Deputy Gardner, sir, and a number of other members have spoken about the importance of sticking to our decision. And of course, it's only worth sticking to a decision if it's the right thing to do. Deputy Gardner also pointed out that we keep coming back to try and save the senators, but we only do that, sir, because the founders of or the perpetrators, if I can use that word, sir, of the move to remove the senators, sir, keep coming back again and again. We are responding, sir. We're not actually bringing new propositions. We are being forced to respond every single time because members keep bringing it back. If at first you don't succeed, they are trying again, sir. And that, I believe, is starting to wear everybody down, where some members are throwing their hands up and say, look, we've just got to do it. I'm getting fed up of it. We've made our mind up. We can't go back. And that's, I find, disappointing. The Constable of St John's, and he has made his first 2 speeches as the Constable of St John's, have been very good. He referred to the 80% turnout in 1994 in St John, an election where he had helped. And we know that the Constable of St John's has been actively involved in politics behind the scenes for many years, taking an active role in the election process and supporting many candidates in their bids to be elected. Yet through no fault of his own, when he did finally and rightfully join this assembly, sir, he did so. He was elected without a contest, not his fault at all, sir. I think there was a hedgehog that did think about standing against him, but thought better of it. Yet the Constable, sir, is supportive of removing the role of senator, and I don't think any senator since they were introduced in 1948 has ever been elected without a contested election. And I haven't checked there. There might have been a by-election in days gone by, but I don't think there has been, sir. And the 80% turnout, sir, don't forget that was in the days where we had 12 senators elected 6 at a time. We didn't have single election days. Constables, deputies, and senators' elections were on different days, sir. We had the same makeup, similar makeup of the assembly, but we had greater turnout in those days. So you could argue that actually the progress we are claiming to have made is just not working. I don't see how this will strengthen the parish system, because again, as a number of other members have observed, sir, in their view, and I agree with them, as sure as night follows day, if we lose the senators, the constables will be next. And actually, I challenge members in the debate on Gorse
I'm
Amendment.
afraid, if I could interrupt you, Senator, I'm afraid, as you can possibly hear from my recording, there's an echo that's increasing over the last minute or so of your speech. I'm not sure if members again could check that nothing has become switched on that shouldn't have been switched on. And perhaps if you could carry on again, Senator, and we'll see where we get to.
Thank you, sir. I think that, from my end, that appears to be a little bit better, sir.
Yes.
As I said, sir, as sure as night follows day, the constables will be next. And I challenge members, sir, in the next part of the debate, sir, on Senator Gorse's amendment, if they're minded to, sir, just to be honest with the Assembly. Because I know a number of members who were Option A supporters who see us being, just see it being one type of member in the Assembly, to say so now, sir. I think a number of members are thinking that, but we need to know, because I've spoken to some constables as well. One or two of them do not think that's going to happen, but it can't not happen, sir, because I don't think it's going to be possible to run the two offices side by side with the argument on voter equity trumping, in my opinion, wrongly trumping voter representation. I thank the Constable of St. One again, another constable who has listened to his parishioners, and with hindsight, so I wish I had actually perhaps organised or worked with parish deputies or some of the other senators to maybe put some small petitions around the country parishes, encouraging island parishioners to speak to their constables, sir, because I too am of the opinion that the island does not want to lose the island-wide mandate. There is considerable support for that, sir. But as the Chief Minister has said, so many of us are focusing on other things at the moment. There's not been time or the priority given to an orchestrated campaign to save the senators. And I've worked on a number of campaigns at elections, and prior to that, I remember gathering, before we had online petition, gathering several thousand signatures with Senator Ferguson and others standing in King Street, sir, not so long ago. A Deputy Truscott, sir, is his own man, and he has said he's not for changing his mind, but it is disappointing that he supported the island-wide mandate in his manifesto, sir, and is not going to be supporting its retention. But however, that is a matter for him. So, and as Deputy Levy said, we don't have, I don't believe we have the mandate. This Assembly has the mandate to remove that office without the permission of the electorate, sir. Councillor St Helier mentioned a unicameral system, sir, and how it's not conducive to having multi-membership, different types of states member. But I will argue in my next speech, sir, the opposite. We have different types of states member because we are a unicameral system. But as I said, sir, I will come back to that. The Chief Minister, I think, covered the flaws with the previous referendum, so we don't need to go into that again. Perhaps we might talk a little bit more about that in the next debate. Now, Deputy Ward, I think, challenged to understand just what exact island-wide mandate meant, and I have, as a number of members have, served as a deputy and a senator, and issues such as housing. I'll talk about two issues where this, I think, is relevant. One is housing. So I remember when I was a deputy representing St Saviour number 2 district, sir, and the huge support and pressure I had, sir, from my parishioners, from my constituents in St Saviour number 2, to protect green space. They didn't want to lose any more green space for housing. They felt they'd done their bit, sir. They had the majority of the island schools, and they were at their wits' end. And the constable and the deputy St Clements will understand that. So I remember, sir, at a time when the island, as we are now, was desperate for housing, I remember as a deputy fighting against new housing on green fields in my district. So that's an example of where I was, you know, because of the influence of parishioners, and actually I saw myself as working for my parishioners first before the whole island on certain issues. That was an example where I fought against housing, much needed housing, sir, to protect some green space in my district, sir, and on that occasion we were successful. Ironically, since then, sir, I think the space that was protected then, some years later, went on to be developed or partially developed. Another good example, sir, is the hospital, and I've spoken to a number of St Helier deputies, and it's quite interesting. The issue of the hospital is clearly something that's required by all islanders, but there are pressures, especially for the deputies in that district, sir. Well, there are a number of different pressures. There are pressures against any changes to the road. There are some parishioners who actually support Overdale and are very keen to get on with it. There are some parishioners that don't, sir. There are some parishioners that want People's Park. I think the deputies are sort of, you know, they have a difficult job on their hand to balance that, but I think they will do it admirably. Whereas, as a senator, the senator, sir, can look upon that not impartially, but more that they're not just responsible to a district, sir, they're responsible to the whole island. So they can make their decisions free of fear or favour and influence from district or the parish, and that's an important point to make. So for Deputy Ward, that's the difference between, you know, working on a constituency basis and an island-wide basis. I know deputies don't only work in their boundaries, constituency boundaries, they don't. And I remember the deputies elections I participated in, it was a mix. We spoke predominantly about parish or constituency issues, and then we spoke about island-wide issues, because you're right, when we are in this assembly, we are all equal. But of course, deputies and constables, sir, are I think heavily influenced at times by parish, quite rightly, by their parish and constituency interests. That's why they're elected there, sir. I mean, the deputy of Grooville is absolutely right, sir, but I've already mentioned that about the mandate to remove senators. The deputy of St One, sir, I took rather a bizarre comment about sort of senators being some sort of hangover, and I will address that and next time round in my speech on Senator Gorst's amendment, sir. But I look forward to doing that, because there really are some very, very important reasons why, as a unicameral system, we have 3 types of members. And I agree strongly with both the very good speeches of Constable, sir. I mean, Constable of St Clements, sir, has held, I think, just about every type of office available. So sorry if I get the titles mixed up at times in the Constable of Trinity, sir, who made concise speeches, both of which I agree, sir. So thank you all very much for participating and for the members for their contributions, sir. As I said, these amendments are made in the spirit of compromise, sir, and I'll finish there and ask for the appeal, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'd ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way.
Sir, I'm unable to vote again. It's come against me.
Right, if you want to vote in the chat, you can do it that way if you want.
We have 40 on the link.
40. So have you managed to vote, Deputy Sutton, or is you voting in the chat? Have you managed to vote, or you... Very well. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, ask the referee to close the voting. The amendment to the amendment has been defeated. 15 votes pour, 29 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and I note a further 2 votes contre in the chat. Very well. We now return to the second amendment, Senator Gorst's amendment. Does any member wish to speak on that amendment? Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. If the Assembly approves this amendment, it will be reversing the decision made by most members in December 2020. The media and public's response to that decision was very positive, and there was a real sense of moving forward. This takes us back to where we have been for the last 20 years, making small progress, then getting cold feet and failing to implement it. The public are frustrated by our lack of progress. So I wish to address some of the comments that were brought up in the debate to Senator Farnham's amendment, which also carry over to this one. So the Chief Minister mentioned in his speech that some of the conclusions we have made regarding what the public think and feel is not evidence-based, and he quoted the findings of a Murray poll that took place during his previous term of office. It's also been mentioned by other members that it is an insult to the public and condescending to think that they do not understand our current system. Members referred to mostly young people when stating this. However, it's not just young people, it's adults as well. 60% of those eligible to vote do not vote. So I would like to remind members that PPC in this term of office carried out surveys and in-depth market research. As I've said before, For Insight undertook a massive body of work on our behalf and ensured they collected data from a representative sample of the population. And before anyone thinks about criticising or questioning For Insight's integrity, as has been done in previous debates, the government regularly use For Insight when seeking to gauge public opinion and undergo market research. So, sir, I'm going to quote some of the findings from that body of work, which were included in the original PPC proposition P126. Firstly, the conclusions from the survey were as followed. 45% felt dissatisfied with the current composition of States Assembly. 70% believe our system should change. 79% think that the electoral reform should prioritise giving each elector a vote of equal value. That's 79%. 61% believe there should be just one type of states member. 74% were overall in favour of the PPC proposition. Now I'm coming to the conclusions from the focus groups. The overall opinion of the current system was, and I quote, "It's confusing and overcomplicated." There are too many politicians. Some parishes are underrepresented. The system is unfair and inequitable. And 85% of respondents stated that the system should change, and that 89 were in favour of the PPC proposition. The overall reaction to this proposal was positive. It was perceived as much clearer and simplified, fairer and equitable. It was perceived to better address the constituencies and districts than previous options, and that voter equity was very important to most. Going back to Senator Gorst's amendment, in his speech, Senator Gorst suggested that the role of senator is the most democratically elected member, and he looks to our sister Isle as an example. Surely that paves the way for the removal of the connotabs in due course and to a single type all-island member. That would see parishes destroyed and replaced with an all-island mandate. That was not what this Assembly has said they wanted. They wanted to keep the connotabs and the parish system. To also pick up on the Deputy St Peter's earlier comment where he asked whether the public were asked, and I believe other members also touched on this, the public were asked if they wanted to keep the senators in the referendum in 2013 and chose not to. Senator Gorst's amendment also ignores the referendum result of 2013 when the public agreed that there should only be two types of states members. The referendum showed that overwhelmingly the majority supported the move to larger, equally sized constituencies, and that is the one thing option A and option B had in common. Voters were happy to lose the senator-deputy distinction. Option C, which kept the three types of member, was decisively rejected. Senator Gorst says in his report that at present we can all have a say at every general election as to who is the leader of our next government. This is clearly not true. Senator Gorst suggests that the fact that every chief minister has come from the senatorial benches since 2005 has created a precedent and an expectation from the public that the chief minister will be a senator. Yet several times in the past, when proposals have been lodged to place this into statute, the Assembly has rejected them. Candidates can advise the electorate of their intention to run for Chief Minister during their campaign, and there is scope in the future for specific hustings to be held for those candidates seeking that role if elected. To suggest the public votes for someone as a senator because they believe he or she will become Chief Minister is misleading. One only has to look at the outcome of the last election to see that the top two candidates chosen by the public were subsequently not those chosen by the Assembly to be Chief Minister. In fact, the Assembly has repeatedly rejected the public's opinion, and since 2005 has only once placed the poll topper, Senator Gorst himself in 2014, as Chief Minister. So to imply this now as one of the primary reasons to retain the role of senators is spurious. In trying to encourage quality candidates to come forward, PPC is aware that the current system is not fair. Senatorial candidates have a greater financial outlay than their deputy counterparts if they are to ensure their message reaches the entire island, which may be a deterrent for those with limited budgets. The 9 districts will be more compact, even those where several parishes come together for electoral purposes. Having smaller districts rather than an island mandate will ensure that members are more accessible and more closely connected to the needs of the residents of their districts. For voters, it will be a less complicated process to choose representatives from their district. All the candidates will be relevant to them and have an interest in addressing their concerns. For elected members, it will be far easier to gauge public opinion and represent those views within the Assembly. Senator Gorst also claims that the loss of the senators would mean that we all have the number of votes that we can cast at elections reduced, whilst the total number of members remains the same. And he says this unnecessarily reduces democracy in Jersey. We argue that the opposite is true. It is not about the number of people you can elect, but about the power of those members' votes in the Assembly, which are paramount and important. PPC has demonstrated that there is a clear and unfair discrepancy between the voting power of somebody living in a more populated electoral district than somebody living in a more rural location. And members have shown their agreement with this when the Assembly voted in favour of Part A of P126 in 2020, which stated, fair representation and equality in voting weight and power across the whole population should be the basis for any reform of the composition and election of the states. Surely democracy should not be a postcode lottery. Senator Gorst mistakenly argues that the retention of the 8 senators, and consequently reduction of 1 deputy for 8 of the districts, would have no impact at all on achieving greater equity in terms of voting. To the contrary, his amendment would result in the current inequities being maintained and in some districts made worse. In addition, 3 districts would fall outside of the ideal plus or minus 10% variance, which is deemed as best practice. It is this random approach to voter equity and equality which has resulted in the current unbalanced and undemocratic system. One further aspect of this amendment is to maintain the existing 3-member structure of the Assembly. PPC has extensively researched its reforms, and during market research undertaken in 2019, it was evident that the current system confuses would-be voters, as stated earlier. They simply do not understand the difference between the 3 members, and with good cause. Once elected, there really is no difference between the 3 in terms of their work within the Assembly, even less so the move to ministerial government from the committee system. Prior to 2005, senators did indeed occupy the majority of presidencies on the major committees, but the ministerial system is much more equitable. In all 4 Council of Ministers there have been since 2005, deputies and connétables have held key ministerial roles. The Clothier report concluded that the continued distinction between senators and deputies was not sustainable, and it was sensible that each representative should have a constituency of voters whose opinions may be more easily sampled and judged over a small area rather than a large one. PPC considers that a simplification of the system, which acknowledged the special nature of the connétables' roles within the parishes as well as within the Assembly, will give the electorate greater clarity. At present, the real difference between the membership is simply the way in which they are elected, and they are currently elected by a small proportion of the island's population. If we want to improve democracy in Jersey, then we must increase turnout. We cannot maintain a system in which less than 1/3 of those eligible to do so actually participate. We cannot maintain that system just because it used to work back in the day. We cannot maintain a system just because it's the last chance to save the senators. Making the system more accessible and simpler to understand will ensure that the remaining 2/3 of our island's electorate feel able to engage in the election process and have their voices heard. That is democracy. I urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Connétable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. During the run-up to this debate, I have been approached by many who embrace the change and by some who do not. I have been told that my father will turn in his grave if I support the demise of the role of the senator. This comment is both harsh and unnecessary, and after thought and soul-searching, and knowing my father, I do not agree. It was a different time. My father was first elected in November 1969. The election date was always in November. No lovely long sunny days for those elections. He was elected as a senator, not having previously served as a deputy or a constable. He was a newcomer. At that time, there were 12 senators elected for a term of 6 years on a rolling basis every 3 years. This distinguished the senators' role from other members of the Assembly. There is now no longer any such distinction. Now we have 8 senators elected together every 4 years. Each current sitting senator in this Assembly is either a former deputy or, in one case, a former constable. Some of these sitting senators are now voting for the demise of their own role. Surely this fact in itself speaks volumes. In answers to those who have sought to tell me my father, former Senator Dick Shenton, would turn in his grave if I vote against, I say no, he would not. My father was a true Democrat, in my eyes a great statesman, and being a true Democrat, he was always open to change. Whilst I intend no disrespect to my senatorial colleagues, were the 17 candidates up for election in 2018 really the best the island could muster? Were they, really? Was the island-wide choice available really the most equitable? Can the new districts improve this? It is my hope that yes, they can. With the advent of the ministerial system, the committee system expired and ministers were introduced, and we saw the advent of a new relationship between the senator and the rest of the Assembly. As previously stated, this was further strained by the reduction of the senators from 12 to 8, significantly reducing their capacity to demonstrate a separation. Each senator in this Assembly was effectively promoted by the voters to this office from the office of either deputy or constable. But it is unclear whether this promotion is really of necessity. Although there is an unspoken convention that the chief minister should be a senator, senators themselves are not obligated to hold senior offices. There is no truly significant distinction between senators, deputies and constables. We are paid the same, we debate in the same way, and we all hold equal ministerial and scrutiny positions. By reducing the size of constituencies to districts or parishes, it will implicitly reduce the cost of campaigning, the resources required, and I hope level the playing field for those who would not be able to afford to fight an island-wide campaign, whilst also encouraging more candidates to stand by making the chance of standing and being successfully electable a considerably more feasible opportunity. In tandem, it may reduce the chance of future candidates being potentially elected by name alone. We could use this as an opportunity to allow the public to zero in on each candidate in their district or parish and get to know them better. We all know that the current manifesto system is inadequate, and the limited information available on candidates during elections is, if nothing else, problematic. The change in composition is not the final stage of improving voter engagement. We have a long road ahead of us, and I hope that this new Assembly, or relatively new Assembly, will meet this challenge. Finally, the fundamental problem with this amendment is that it encourages us to stand still. It asks us to keep a tradition and not try out new ideas. We should seek to avoid this. A truly democratic system is one open to change, open to reform, and open to new ideas. We need all sorts of new ideas to drive up engagement from islanders and keep our democratic system fresh and alive. We have a significant deficit in political education in Jersey, a minimal production of independent research and insight into Jersey's political system and political history. And we have a significant hill to climb if we want to address this, and we really should address this. With respect to the Chief Minister not having an island-wide mandate, could we not address this by having a regular poll, namely island-wide satisfaction with the Chief Minister? In this way, we'd engage the whole island. If the loss of the senators is indeed a terrible mistake, then let us own this mistake and bring them back for the 2026 election. But for now, let's do what the public have asked for. Give this new system a chance, see where it goes, and be open to change. I urge you to vote against this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connie Todd. Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Some months ago, I stood in the Assembly and stated that we would have to agree a compromise if we were to ever deliver the reform that the voting public so clearly wanted. It now seems that no sooner was the said compromise reached, some of our number resolved to undermine it at their earliest opportunity. The electoral reform that we voted for did not challenge the position of our beloved constables, nor was it an exercise in gerrymandering. Instead, it ensured that 2022 will be the most competitive election in Jersey history. Clearly, this prospect has menaced some of our number, and I will briefly explain why our senators currently enjoy a position of privilege that it would seem some of them are reluctant to relinquish. I've heard it said that the purpose of senatorial elections is to elect our ministers. However, the days when being a senator meant that you were assured a ministerial position are in fact long behind us. All of us have one vote in this chamber once we have been elected, but there is no equality in how we get elected. How many Irelanders would be prepared or able to put up £10,000 of their own money to give themselves a favourable chance of election, when their remuneration, if they were to be elected, would be the same as that of a deputy anyway? Only 3 senators are currently acting as ministers, so there can be no serious argument to the effect that the senatorial elections are the people's way of determining who will lead the government. One argument I have heard in favour of retaining the senators is that these elections have, with their 8-vote maximum, historically provided Irelanders with more choice. But there is only a perception that it provides voters with more choice because our broken system has delivered so many uncontested elections at the parish level. And of course, this will soon change. Indeed, I am sure that if you ask parishioners in Grooville and St Martin, they would also advocate keeping the senators, just to make sure they get a vote. But this is not a good reason for their retention, when the better way would quite clearly be for Grooville and St Martin to hold their first contested election for deputy in a decade. Most people I've sought opinions from on senatorial elections say something like, and here I paraphrase, I chose 4 senators straight off, but struggled to pick any more. Some voted for 8 candidates, simply to keep out the candidates they didn't want to win. So rather than voting for candidates for senator, some people are in fact voting against candidates that they do not like. Very few voters even vote for 8 candidates. In 2014, the average number of selections was 6.1 out of 18 standing. In 2018, this decreased to 5.6 selections out of 17 standing. It is therefore clear that the lustre of Ireland-wide elections is diminishing as their competitiveness decreases. Worse still, the loss of safe seats in the country parishes would be guaranteed to result in the senatorial elections becoming less competitive, because as I said, they are much more expensive to participate in than parish ones. If we eliminate uncontested elections on the district level, only to end up with less senatorial candidates than there are seats available, we will have taken one step forward only to take many, many steps back. This amendment is an attempt to save an antiquated system, which we have already acknowledged needs to be dragged into the 21st century. Today, we must ratify our decision to move towards a political process which is simple, fair, and one which Irelanders can readily engage with. We voted by 28 votes to 18 for Part A of P126, which stated that fair representation and equality in voting should be the basis for any reform. Yet in the amendment that we will be asked to vote on today, it asks us to consider whether to reduce the number of representatives allocated to St Saviour, hardly one of our smaller or least populous parishes. This amendment should be rejected so that we can guarantee competitive elections, increase voter participation, encourage more candidates to stand, and ensure fair elections for all islanders. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. The Deputy of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And first, I do congratulate Senator Gorst for bringing this amendment, notwithstanding certain negative comments in this connection. And to those who question the need for a further debate at this stage, I simply ask them to recall that notwithstanding numerous rejections of previous propositions calling for change, all which I say were rejected, that does not seem to have been a deterrent to something very similar having been proposed only a few months later, and I therefore ask that this amendment be regarded with the same courtesy. So many of the points I was going to raise have been addressed in the debate on Senator Farnham's amendment, and I will therefore not repeat them here, and I confine myself to one particular area. In the final paragraph on page 1 of PPC's report accompanying its proposition, reference is made to the committee's aim being to see an increase in voter turnout in 2022. I, and I'm sure all other members, share that aspiration and ambition, but I do question, if not challenge, whether the proposals as now submitted do achieve or are likely to achieve that aim. So I appreciate that this is not a version of Radio 4's programme Just a Minute, where contributors are penalised for repetition, but I am surprised not to have heard reference, or very much reference, to the words connect and disconnect today. I say this in the context of noting that at a time when there were 12 senators, the public at large could be reasonably assured that the persons they then voted for would hold senior office. In short, sir, there was then a connection between the electorate on the one hand and the Assembly on the other, and it is surely that we should seek to resuscitate. In saying that, sir, I've not ignored the comments of many members, including the last speaker, that convention, if such it was, has perhaps fallen into disrepair, but it is not beyond repair, and I think that much could be done in ensuring that those who do attain senatorial office should hold positions of responsibility. And on one aspect, I think Deputy Alves did make reference to the fact that the two persons who topped the poll did not become Chief Minister, but I think I'm right in saying that neither sought that office. If PPC's proposals were approved unattended, the net result, as the Chief Minister has already spelled out, will be that only 1 in 9 residents will be voting for the person who would ultimately be the Chief Minister. If you add to that, sir, the fear of many parishioners, certainly in my own parish, that candidates resident in more populous parishes would have a distinct advantage when it comes to voting for members of the super constituencies, I suggest that the proposals are in fact rather a disincentive rather than an encouragement to vote. And indeed, I have received emails exactly to that effect, where some residents have suggested that they see no point in voting at all should these proposals go through. I do therefore have real concerns that if the proposition is passed, as I say, sir, the element of disconnect, which is surely something we should seek to rectify, will be multiplied rather than reduced. Finally, sir, as is clear, I hope, I regard maintenance of the senatorial sector as fundamental to any improvement in the level of engagement with the electorate, which we should all strive for. And as such, I shall be supporting this particular amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. So it was famously quoted, and has been oft quoted, that no one pretends that democracy is perfect or all wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. And why is it the best, or indeed the worst system? What makes it work and what doesn't? One of its major strengths is also one of its major flaws, and that is the dependence on the losing side accepting the voters' wishes with good grace and acknowledging the legitimacy of the victor. When this does not occur, sir, the consequences can be ugly, as we saw with the shocking scenes on Capitol Hill following the US elections. And what does that have to do with us, Deputy, you may well ask, sir? As don't we always have fair elections where the result is accepted and both parties shake hands? Well, yes and no, sir. There is one major exception, of course, when a referendum was held as to what our electoral system should look like. To the great shame of those involved, this was ignored. Why? Why? Because certain members did not like the result and so decided not to implement it. Of course, away from the ballot box, it's something we see a lot of in the Assembly. The tried and trusted EU method, as I like to describe it. If you don't like the result, bring it back and hope people change their mind. It's been very effective with the hospital over the past decade, and it's cost the taxpayer millions of pounds to this Assembly's great shame. Indeed, astonishingly, there are still some attempting the tactic with the hospital in 2021. Which brings us to today's debate. Why are we here, having a lengthy debate after a fairly substantial vote to finally partially honour the referendum result? There are those, sir, who have been, maybe unfairly, imparted with the motive that it's because the presence of senators makes the current disturbing move of the Assembly to the left with Reform and their populist allies less likely to succeed, as the island-wide mandate, in their view, means the correct sort of person is elected to allow government to function in a smooth manner. If that is the aim, and it is only impugned on them, as I say, I'm sure that they have different motives, but if that is the aim, then it is flawed, sir. As we have seen in this Assembly, 50% of the senators elected in 2018 have not conformed to that model. Indeed, in one case, I would venture to suggest that you would have to go back to one young Guido Fawkes, wished he'd paid more attention in chemistry lessons to find a person less conforming to the smooth running of a government. Even if it was true, sir, of senators that they were more conformist, this is not a satisfactory reason for blocking much needed electoral reform. I would advise the two senators involved in these amendments and in bringing this proposition, both of whom I consider to be very honourable men and I've had the pleasure of working with for the last 3 years. I would ask them to embrace the changes and then work towards bringing the voters a sensible choice as to the political direction of the island. A choice that I believe the eminently sensible people of Jersey will embrace wholeheartedly and thus reject the rise of the populist left, where it should be rejected, sir, through the ballot box and not fudged in a committee room. There are, of course, many other reasons why the senatorial role has not been working well. Deputy Labby quite correctly, sir, suggested the debacle that is the hustings. And I have to say it was, I went to view one. I couldn't put myself viewing another one. After 15 people have answered the same question, the 16th can have very little to add, although it could be said that it sets you in a good position to sit in the Assembly, where probably many of us are doing that today, sir. I would also like to address the assumed statement that if you are not elected on an all-Ireland or all-nation mandate, you're somehow lacking. I would remind members that under that line of thinking, the election of Lloyd George by the good people of Carnarvon, Sir Winston Churchill by the people of Epping, Clement Attlee from Deputy Ward's stomping ground, sir, of Limehouse, Margaret Thatcher of Finchley, their elections and their leadership would all have been electorally fatally flawed, whereas under the all-nation election, that of Hitler, Stalin and Saddam Hussein would have been legitimised. Finally, sir, a vital important facet of any democracy is that of fairness. It is certainly a fact that it is much more financially difficult to stand as a senator, hence the substantial difference in electoral allowances permitted under our current law. This gives an advantage to those with substantial private incomes, or indeed, sir, rich, cash-rich trade unions. Or is that the idea, sir? As Bob Hope said when JF Kennedy was elected President of the United States, a triumph for democracy. It proves that a millionaire has just as good a chance as anybody else. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Connie Tarberson, one.
Thank you, sir. And I will be brief. When we voted on the last proposition, in my view, the Assembly spoke, and in my mind, it's quite simple. To make this proposition work, we needed the last proposition to be accepted, because the proposition we have before us, in my view, severely compromises the equal representation for deputies that we agreed last December. So, from my point of view, it becomes unsupportable in its current version. And it is some sadness that we will say goodbye to the senators, but I'm not prepared to vote for something that compromises something that I voted for last year with the new format of deputies, where we have much more equal voter power for the deputies across the island. And so I sadly cannot support this proposition, and with that in mind, I would urge other members to consider the same point. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Constable. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. So it's always fascinating to hear in any debate the two very different sides of an argument, both claiming the public support their side. We've heard this today from both sides, and it's frustrating because almost always there are facts which can back up both views. But rather than trying to claim the public back my view, I'll just come out with some facts. So the first fact is the 2013 referendum. It did return option B, which was larger districts without senators. Option C, which maintained senators, was roundly rejected. That's a fact. Another fact is this Assembly, for some unknown reason, it's unfathomable to me, rejected that referendum back then. It was the first time I passionately just couldn't hold myself in anymore, and I came down here, and I've said it before, and as an islander, I stood on the steps of the Assembly outside in the Royal Square, and I said to every States member who walked past me, it wasn't all States members, it's only those who walked past me, shame on you. Because I was so incensed that they turned their backs on the will of the island at the time. It doesn't matter how many people actually voted in that election, 100% of the electorate was invited to vote in that election. Those who felt that they wanted to did. And as we've heard, 80% of that electorate backed A. That's a fact. Another fact is that the Council of Ministers does not bear any reflection to the senatorial election. When the current Chief Minister, Senator Le Fondré, nominated his Council of Ministers, he nominated 6 senators. He could have nominated 8, chose to nominate 6. Of those 6, 5 were returned by the Assembly. Today, we sit here, 2 more have left the Council of Ministers, so the Council of Ministers has 3 senators within it. There is no way anybody can claim that the Council of Ministers is a reflection of the senatorial election. This government has shown it. Previous governments have shown it. We heard Deputy Alves say that the only poll-topping senator to hold the role of Chief Minister was Senator Gorst, apologies, in 2014. We know that the famous one, many people talk about, is former Deputy Senator Sivray topping the poll, and former Senator Frank Walker, I believe, I apologise if I'm wrong, but he came in the lowest eligible place. Senator Walker became the Chief Minister, Senator Sivray didn't. There is no reflection, the senatorial elections bear no reflection on the Council of Ministers. That's a fact. The other idea that is, and so this is the idea we're moving away from facts now, going into argument. The Chief Minister should have an island-wide mandate. That's what people say. Well, really? Outside of Guernsey, can anybody tell me, and I'd love them to tell me, of anywhere where the Prime Minister or Chief Minister is elected by the entire nation? Going back into facts, Boris Johnson is elected in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. To be honest, I only discovered in 2017 where Uxbridge was when I had to go there to buy my cat, and discovered it's next to Heathrow. I had no idea till then. The electorate in Uxbridge and South Ruislip is 72,000 people. That's the whole electorate in 2010, so it may have grown a little since then. When he first when he was first elected in a general election as a Prime Minister, if you remember, he was sitting at the time as Prime Minister because Theresa May had resigned. He was elected with a majority of 5,034. That's the lowest majority for a sitting Prime Minister since 1924, almost 100 years. We heard Deputy of St Mary talk about if this reform goes ahead, then only 1 in 9 people will have voted, if I remember rightly. 1 in 9 people will have had the opportunity to vote for future Chief Ministers. Well, look at the UK. We often do. In the UK, only 1 in 2,367 people voted for Boris Johnson. So 1 in 9 is something of an improvement on the UK, where only 1 in 2,367 people voted for the current Prime Minister. I'll move into the realm of fact, argument dressed up as fact. Reality is that the distinction of senators, the distinction that gave them the seniority, their seniority, has been eroded ever since their term of office was reduced to the same of other members, and their numbers also cut. Whilst maintaining the pretense of fact whilst delivering an argument, I'd also say that senatorial hustings are a waste of time. I'll use St Lawrence as an example, and I'm currently sitting opposite Senator Mezek, who was there, and went, I'm sure, to all of them, but I only saw the St Lawrence hustings. In St Lawrence, we had 17 candidates. We had a packed parish hall, standing room only. I believe in the 2 hours of that hustings, we managed to get through 4, possibly 6 questions. That was it, in 2 hours. The people of St Lawrence were given the opportunity to ask 4, possibly 6 questions. In the deputies election in 2018, where I was a candidate, in 2 hours, The deputy candidates faced 23 questions. My parishioners that I represent today know a lot more about me, or knew a lot more about me and my other candidates at the end of their deputies election than they could ever claim to know about the senatorial candidates. They knew nothing. I knew nothing about the senatorial candidates. I walked away feeling like that was a waste of my time. Why did I just spend 2 hours packed in and it was sardines at the back? To hear 17 different answers from, or hear 17 people answer the same question for, like say, my memory, possibly 6 times. I've also found it interesting, the view that the removal of senators will lead to the demise of the parish system. Indeed, I've spoken to one reformist, and by that I mean someone in favour of electoral reform, not a member of Reform Jersey, recently, who felt that today's proposals would do the exact opposite, and in fact would entrench the constables in the State's Assembly for good. And this person I was speaking to is someone who feels that the constables shouldn't be in the State's Assembly. So their concern about the proposals today was that the constables would never leave the Assembly if they go through. So it's fascinating then to hear precisely the opposite argument offered by the people on the other side. I've got to admit, I agree with the deputy I was speaking to recently, because if these reforms go through, the constables will be able to claim they are the link to the parish. There is no one else. Me as a deputy, if I'm re-elected, I will stand in St Lawrence, St John and Trinity. I won't be able to claim that I represent solely St Lawrence. The Connétable of St Lawrence will be able to claim that. The Connétable of Trinity will be able to claim that, and the Connétable of Saint Jean will be able to claim that. I won't. And so I see that as someone who wants to defend the constables in the Assembly. I see that as the reason that will keep them here. So I do reject the argument that the removal of senators will mean that in 2026 we will have no constables in the Assembly. And in fact, I ask anyone who feels that they shouldn't be here, and I look across the Assembly again at Senator Mezek, please do not bring any further electoral reform proposals for the next 4 or 8 years. If we get this through today, then this has to be the end of the story for a good, decent length of time, because we don't need the Assembly talking about the Assembly any more than it already has. So not only do I believe that this move strengthens the constable's claim to be in the States, I hope that if we go ahead with this, it will not only strengthen the constable's claim to be in the States, it will inject them with renewed energy and dynamism, because they will know that they represent their parish. And so every parish needs that energy and dynamism from its connétable. And I really hope they take this opportunity, if these reforms pass, to show us exactly why connétables are so important, and those parish links are so important. I also feel it's interesting that by removing the senators, the connétables, in a sense, can take that role of senator in the way that we see in the US. They have a bicameral system, and in the Senate, they have Wyoming returning as many senators as California or New York. We will have St Mary returning as many constables as St Helier. It's a similar situation. And the connétables, I hope, will see their role then as that kind of balancing role that the senators, I believe, in the US are meant to provide, and that back in 1948, perhaps the senators, when they were created here, were meant to provide. That will fall to the connétables, and I really hope every connétable sees that and plays a role in the Assembly that shows that their wisdom can come and be brought to the debates. So for those who fear the end of the connétables in the States, I don't believe that this is any reason to fear the end of that role. I believe it does entrench them. I've just spotted, before I sum up, Deputy Guida, my colleague in St Lawrence, saying that in France, they do elect as a nation their head of state. I wasn't talking about the head of state. I was talking about the chief minister and the prime minister. And indeed, in France, the prime minister is not elected by the whole nation. So that appeared in the chat in front of us. So I do reject Deputy Guida's intervention there. And so please, I feel that we have to move forward. I feel that this is the way forward. And I personally will continue to defend the role of the connétables in the States of Jersey. As long as they show that energy and that dynamism, and they are bringing their parishes' needs and views to this assembly, then I shall defend them. And this will not be a reason for 2026 seeing their demise at all. And I will stand against that. And I hope that others do too. And so please don't fear voting against Senator Gorst's proposition. I do apologise. And I have to state again, I also cannot support Deputy Gorst's proposition because it weakens representation in St Lawrence. And there's no way as a representative of St Lawrence I can do that. So thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy, does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on this amendment, Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. The removal of senators simply does not make any sense. And I'm going to explain the rationale now, sir, again, for the reason why we have 3 types of member in our assembly, sir. We are, as the Constable St Helier mentioned earlier, a unicameral system, sir. We have one Parliament, one assembly. We don't have an upper house. We don't have devolved assemblies. We don't have county councils, borough councils, city councils, town councils, village councils. We have the States Assembly, sir. In that assembly, constituencies are represented by the deputies, the parishes, sir, and our form of local government are represented by the constables, and the senators represent our small island national interests, sir, and are there for balance. And that's why we have 3 types of member in the assembly. It's not a hangover from the Durats as has been described, sir. It was carefully thought out after the Second World War to provide a sustainable form of government of the island, sir, operating in a small jurisdiction with one chamber of government, sir, because that really is what our size dictates. Things have moved on perhaps a little bit then, sir, but in the context of democracy and the size, sir, we are still relatively small. That is why we have 3 types of member. Members will conveniently forget that in their rush to embrace the anglicisation of our political system, because that is what this points to. Some members are not going to be happy until we have a carbon copy of the system used in the United Kingdom and other bigger and great democracies, sir, but we are not of that size. The Chief Minister, so, and it's quite difficult to listen to members saying that senators have a high opinion of themselves. Okay, we can all make jokes about that, and of course, as members of the Assembly, we are all ridiculed by the public from time to time. We've got broad shoulders, we can take it. But I can't recall any of my senatorial colleagues, or indeed any other members, taking that sort of stance or expecting any form of favour simply because they hold an island-wide mandate. What the island-wide mandate does do is enable the holder to work and make decisions on an island-wide basis without fear or favour from parish pressure or parish interest. And that parish interest is important for the deputies and the constables, sir, but we need a balance. If you looked at many, I think I might have taken a proposition or amendment in the what seems a very long time since 2000 and I think 10, when the number of senators, it was agreed the number of senators would be reduced to now. So to now, I took an amendment or proposition that the Chief Minister should be elected from those holding the island-wide mandate, and there was a reason for that. And I know some members spoke earlier of not understanding the concepts there of what a Chief Minister being returned by a ninth of the electorate, or the Chief Minister being returned by a district. the Chief Minister, sir, whoever he or she may be in the future, holds a tremendous amount of influence and has to work without fear or favour of small constituency pressures, in my opinion, sir. And I think the Chief Minister also needs to work without having to look over their shoulder at their chances of re-election. And that's, I think that would be a difficult conflict to deal with when the Chief Minister is returned by a smaller district, sir. And actually, we might call them super constituencies, but in the context of other constituencies, and I was looking not so long ago at the size of the constituencies, sir, and Deputy Ash mentioned some famous prime ministers, and they were returned, sir, by constituencies bigger than our island in some instances. And of course, being a chief minister in Jersey being returned with a relatively small number of votes, I think could potentially create problems. It might not. But how would a chief minister deal with a very contentious issue in their constituency without fear or favour of repercussions at the next election? And that has to be a concern worth more consideration. Then we move to equity against representation. And there is no doubt that voter equity improves with more even numbers in the constituencies. But our representation is considerably reduced, and that's been dismissed, easily dismissed by a number of members. They think it's not important. Just wait for the echo to subside, sir. But in our small island, it is important. Representation is important. The number of members we return is extremely important, sir, insofar as we have more representatives we can contact for a whole range of issues, sir, whether it be a district, a parish or an island-wide. And I'm not saying you can't go to your connétable or your deputy for an island-wide issue, but you can go to all three of them. Every parish meeting, sir, held in the roadshow resoundingly rejected the loss of the island-wide mandate. But those parish roadshows have been conveniently ignored. And I'm not sure why. The electorate were ignored when the number of senators were reduced, and we're going to do it again now. We're going to we're on the cusp of removing the island-wide mandate without the permission of the electorate, and I think that is absolutely wrong. The referendum we held in 2013 was flawed in many ways. We had three choices: an amendment to none of the above in the referendum. On the referendum sheet was rejected by the Assembly. That's why I believe, or that certainly contributed to the turnout being very low, because so many islanders did not want either option A, B or C, and there was no option for them to reject it, and the referendum slips down. I believe that's why we didn't get a good turnout. We should have held it at a general election time, and referendums, in my opinion, should be phrased that can take a yes or no answer. And we should be going at the next election with a simple question, as we did with constables: do the electorate want senators, yes or no? But that does not appear in the plans of the Privileges and Procedures Committee, unfortunately. This will also not improve voter engagement or voter turnout, so, or the number of. How can it, when we are removing the role of senator, the most democratic votes, and it simply won't do it. It didn't work for Guernsey. It's not going to work for us, sir. Although if it does pass today, then we will have to try and make it work. But I think it will be a huge challenge. The senatorial elections do by far receive the most engagement, and I take on board what Deputy Morrell said, although I don't recall seeing him packed into the back of St Lawrence Parish Hall, but I'm sure he was there. And there might have only been 6 questions for 17 candidates, but there were 102 answers given by the candidates over those from those questions. And believe you me, when you're at those hustings, you can ask 17 candidates the same questions and get 17 very different answers. And the hustings do make a real difference. In a senatorial election, having a good hustings is a really important part of getting elected, sir. I want to turn to the Venice Commission. I ask members to bear with me for 3 or 4 minutes because I want to refer to the excellent comments of the committee to P126 2019. And I'm going to quote from that, sir, and this will take a couple of minutes, but it's worth listening to carefully. Jersey remains at present what is known as a consensus-based system, of which there are few in the world. This means that its politics largely lacks political parties, whereas the Venice Commission, when addressing the requirements of democracy, assumes that party politics are central to elections. In Jersey, the main aim is to elect the people who will have to form a consensus. That's team politics, not necessarily party politics. And one of the, I think, the great things about our consensual system is that we can all agree to disagree at times. We can all vehemently disagree on one issue, but we can work collaboratively on the next issue, sir. This makes the relative size of each member's electoral mandate less sensitive. For example, no one thought to compare in the chief ministerial election if members supporting the defeated candidate in fact represented more voters than the successful one. As no one was elected for the purpose of backing one or other candidate, it was irrelevant in the Jersey system as it's presently operating. All systems and institutions should be called upon to justify themselves from time to time, and the principal factors present in Jersey depend upon how parish identity is viewed. How this should be viewed is not a matter of international law. It is a matter of local identity in the jurisdictions where the issue arises. It is common for countries to ensure the proportionate representation for smaller component parts. Countries which systematically practice aggressive proportionality in one form or another are likely to be told to consider changing, but properly understood, that is not to say they are non-compliant with the Venice Commission, but rather they are judging themselves to be exceptional cases. There is no sign, sir, of an international condemnation of that response. One such example, sir, would be Andorra. It is not a federation, however, each of its 7 parishes have 2 legislators, regardless of size, with a further 14 nationally elected members. Other clear examples of this principle in the lower legislative house are India, Spain, Canada, Argentina, France, and Australia. The Venice Commission, sir, states that constituency boundaries may also be determined on the basis of geographical criteria and the administrative or indeed historic boundary lines, which often depend upon geography. So whilst we might strive to comply with the Code of Good Practice in electoral matters and guidelines and other international covenants, we must be mindful that exceptions are permissible. The permissible departure from the norm of not more than 10% to 15% should only be in special circumstances, such as the protection of a concentrated minority or a sparsely populated administrative entity, sir. When we look at Jersey's unique culture and heritage, we more than comply and qualify for that exemption, sir. We must resist the Anglicisation of our electoral system, sir. We must accept that we don't have to be the same as everybody else, sir. Our systems have served us well over the decades. Quite often it's not the system, but very often it's some of the people within the system that don't make it work. And our electorate want us all at times to work much more closely together, and our system, sir, allows for that to happen. Parties, sir, if the people of Jersey wanted parties, we would have them. There are signs we could be heading in that direction, but I do not see any great appetite from members of the public to form parties. Indeed, all of the parties that are being formed and the ideas are coming from within the Assembly. It's the wrong way around, sir. Parties should be formed in the country and then make their way into the legislature, sir. I've spoken and I've campaigned to maintain the island-wide mandate for over 10 years, sir. And I hope members take my contribution, sir, the spirit in which it is intended. It's not for wrecking, sir, but I honestly believe firmly, sir, and with all of my heart, that the island-wide mandate and maintaining it is for the very best interest of our island democracy, sir. And I urge all members, whichever way they voted last time, to think very, very carefully which way they vote now and of the potential consequences, sir. Thank you very much.
Very much, Senator. Deputy Sullivan.
Thank you, sir. And I'll try and be brief. I'm being bombarded by the proposer of this amendment to justify that the place of senators is unique and that they are very able and capable at dealing with island-wide issues. So look at some of the issues I've been involved in, deliberately or otherwise, and I think, what should I do? Or why should I, humble deputy, be bothering with these island-wide issues? Why don't I just bundle them together and give them to the nearest senator and say, you deal with it. You deal with island-wide issues, because I'm getting tired. The right to representation and recognition, the trade unions, discrimination law. Remember? Snuck that back in July when we all wanted to go on holiday. The subsidy for GPs, so that GPs are now only £12, or is it not 45? Island-wide issue. Income support to lone parents. We scrapped that at one stage, got involved. The living wage that we now are attached to and support. Why not give that to the senator? Say, sort it, please. Funding for the town park. You might call that a local issue, but I think that green space and that green lawn is an island-wide issue. Gas prices. Remember that winter? Dear oh dear. Redundancy pay, sponsored by, initiated by the crisis with Woolworths. Each of those island-wide significant issues, and I, a humble backbencher, have involved myself in them, sometimes with good end. I'm persuaded not by the proposer and his supporters that somehow being a senator is somehow special. It's not. We have the same duties, same obligations, whatever our status. There is no need for this complicated third level of representation. 2 is ample. I would argue 2 is too many, but 2 is ample. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Senator Gorst to respond.
Thank you, sir. It's never straightforward to sum up a debate when, on the one hand, one can see the writing on the wall from listening to the speakers during the debate. But I think that Senator Farnham's recent speech encapsulated why it is right for us to, right now, on the verge of removing the senatorial office in law from Jersey to think again. We've heard lots of arguments. We've heard lots of opinions. We've spoken about the referendum, and of course there was also the referendum to keep constables in the states. This now, sir, is the time for decision. And as I said right at the start, in order to change and move forward, and institutions always need to change and renew themselves and respond to the modern world. But in order to deliver change, a balance and a compromise has to be sought. And that really is what this decision is about. Because if we look back to the campaigns for the referendum, and I'm absolutely delighted that we're now joined in this assembly by the Connétable of St John. And he touched on his involvement successfully in that campaign and others around him. And he did an excellent job. Back in 2013, the states rejected the result of that referendum. And of course, things have changed since then. So the states rejected that referendum, just as they rejected the changes that Clothier had suggested. And some of those who supported option A have now, as we've heard in this debate, compromised to support option B, which is what the PPC's proposal mirrors. Some of those supported option C, which was no change. But of course, that campaign group, also ably led, said change, but not this change. That was their strapline. But option C was for no change. And some of those who supported option C and are now sitting in this assembly and have sat on PPC now have moved and support option B. And I, sir, like them, with the passage of time, mindful of all of that detail and reference back to international bodies that Senator Farnham ably reminded us of, I'm now concerned that all these years down the line, if we don't step forward carefully, we may in fact lose something which, as I've said, our sister isle had recognised, and they've gone to an all island-wide mandate. So there is an option for change today. And it's not just, as some speakers suggested, barely any change. It is the change of moving to larger districts or super constituencies, whichever one wishes to call them, and at the same time retaining the office of senator. I've got to say I like the history lesson of the Deputy of St One. But we can, of course, always learn from history. And I think we cannot be in any doubt that the office of Senator has served our island and our community well. So I see on social media that some have commented that I am the very embodiment of why we should remove senators from the states. But that was posted, sir, by somebody, if we don't accept this amendment today, lives in a different parish. I don't want to get into an East versus West argument in this debate, sir, because I'll just lose votes. But would then have no influence over whether I was successful in a future election or not. And I do think it is important. And I know we've had a conversation about, and comments have been made about government and this government not being made up or now only containing 3 senators, and that is of course correct. But I do not recall in the past any suggestion or assumption coming post an election that the Chief Minister would not be drawn from the senatorial ranks. And that will change. And I was a little surprised that some suggested that because it happened elsewhere, then that was okay for us as well. I am not personally of that view. I also want to just touch on, sir, the issue of voter equity, because I know Deputy Morell said that having supported Senator Farnham, he didn't feel able to now support me because my proposal takes 1 deputy out of each of the new districts and recreates the 8 senatorial seats. And so I'm confused by those who think that that changes the voter equity, because I don't believe it does. Every islander who's registered to vote will, under my proposal, have 1 deputorial vote removed from the proposal of PPC, but be given back 8 senatorial votes, increasing their influence in the makeup of the Assembly, and as I said, in the potential makeup of the government and the scrutiny functions. And that can only be a good, positive thing. So the question is, where for us today in this Assembly does that balance lie? And I was interested that some speakers indicated their belief that by removing the office of senator and introducing large electoral districts, that we would see voter turnout increasing. And yet I haven't, and there has been no evidence presented today that that would be the case. In fact, the only evidence that we might be able to consider is the evidence in our sister isle. And that is when they moved from large constituencies to the senator, to the all island wide mandate, then voter turnout went up. And I think there is a very real possibility that by removing the office of senator, what may happen in 2022 is that voter turnout may worsen. But of course, voter turnout is not just about the constitution of the states. And as others have said, there are many, many other elements that make up why islanders do or do not turn out to vote. And whatever the result of this vote is, and these legislative changes are today, we owe it to the island and to the electorate to do that piece of work, to encourage voter turnout. Because I don't actually think that our system is overly complicated. We have 3 offices. They are not difficult to explain. They are unique. But should that mean that we then reduce them just because we're unique? Just because our approach is unique? I don't think it does. And I don't think any argument has been made to make that case. In fact, Senator Farnham, as I said, made a strong case for why that doesn't need to be the case. And I do, sir, and I know the chair of PPC indicated that because I'd mentioned Guernsey and their single member all island-wide mandate, that by retaining the senators, we were more likely to lose the constables. I refute that argument, sir. In fact, Deputy Southern, slip of the tongue there, sir, Deputy Southern just said in a few moments ago that 2 categories of states members is too many. And I have, over time, started to become concerned that by removing the office of senator, we are setting on a road. Perhaps we did it when we initially removed 4 of the senators, but by making a momentous decision today to remove the office of senator, the challenge will come, and it will be more difficult to argue against that actually 2 categories of members is confusing and isn't like anywhere else. And so we should simply move to 1. And I think we all in our heart of hearts know that if that argument came, it would be the office of Connétable that would be the one that would be removed. And I, for one, sir, do not want to see that happen. Perhaps, sir, I try not to be personal on these occasions, but as an adopted son of this island, I absolutely recognise we have many uniquenesses that make us the special place that we are. And our parochial system and constables sitting in the States is one of them. And we would remove them, I believe, at our peril. And I have slowly come to the conclusion that today is not the day that we should remove the island-wide mandate from our electoral makeup. I don't believe that a strong case has been made to remove it. I believe the case has been about administrative difficulty, about hustings, about the cost of entering those elections. And yet it is suggested to us that that is a reason to remove the senatorial office, but will create larger constituencies where it will be more costly for deputies to stand and run a campaign. I don't think that argument runs logically together either. So we come down to it's difficult
and complicated to explain, and islanders don't understand it. So we'll get rid of the most democratic office in the States. I don't think the solution proposed today is the appropriate one to answer the question of why islanders find our system so complicated to understand. And I'm sure many of them actually don't, but those that do, then we must, as the Chief Minister said, look to ourselves and our own failings in explaining our system to this generation and to the next. So it's been a good debate, and I know that each of us feel it keenly. There's been passionate speeches on both sides. I think we can have change. We can have a step change for the next election, and the next assembly can decide then the future steps. Change of Lords districts, keeping the constables in the office in the states, and retaining the senatorial office. All of us come to each of these debates with our own opinions, the way that we've been lobbied or contacted by parishioners and our electorate, and we each have to make up our own mind. I'm not sure that this issue will go away if we vote to remove the office of senator today, as it didn't go away in our sister isle. So, sir, I ask members to think very carefully before they decide to vote against this amendment. And for us, remove the office of senator. I don't want to be a part of that, sir. I think it's an office worth fighting for. I think it's an office worth retaining. I think it's the most democratic office of the three. So why would we remove a democratic office to make the overall system better? Because I don't think it does. And sir, with that, I ask for the appel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. The appel is called for. I ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat in the usual way. I open the voting and ask members to vote.
So, 44.
Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 15 votes pour, 29 votes contre, no abstention within the link, 2 votes contre, 1 vote pour within the chat.
We have them read out, please, sir.
Yes. Could we read them out, please, greffier?
So those members who voted for: Senator Farnham, Deputy Guida, Senator Gorst, the Constable of Grouville, Deputy Trinity, Constable of Trinity, Constable of St Brelard, Constable of St Saviour, Senator Deputy Wickenden, Deputy St Peter, Senator Ferguson, Constable of St Lawrence, Deputy Grouville, and the Constable of St Mary. In the chat, I also saw a vote from the Deputy of St Mary. Those votes in contra: Deputy Dewbley, Deputy Alves, Deputy Ward, Deputy Aye, Deputy Gardner, Deputy of St Martin, Deputy Ash, Constable of St Juan, Constable of St John, Constable of St Helier, Deputy Labby, Santa Valva, the Constable of St Clement, Deputy Lewis, Senator Timur, Deputy of St Juan, Senator Mezek, Deputy Morel, Deputy Pinnell, Deputy Martin, Deputy Young, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Lahegre, Constable of St Martin, Senator Pallett, Deputy Pamplin, Constable of St Peter, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Southern, and I also saw the Deputy of St John.
Very well. Before moving towards the adjournment, clearly there's been a lot of activity within the chat relating to the arrangements for future business. The suggestions range from sitting very late tomorrow or moving to Friday as a continuation day. Deputy Martin wishes to speak. Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. It's becoming more and more apparent that this is going to be a long debate, and quite rightly so. But we have two massive pieces of legislation, and people are sitting out there wanting to know when they can travel and under what rules. And then there's also the fishing, which must be done by Friday. I've taken sort of a guide by the chat, and I'm going to propose that we make Friday, apparently has to be proposed, although some people think it is a natural continuation, that it gives people more notice, and that if we don't finish, we must sit Friday to finish everything. I mean, there is no, we're going home at 5:30. We finish on Friday and we will stay till we need to on Friday. I propose that, sir. Thank you.
So you propose Friday as a continuation day, Deputy?
Yes, sir.
And is that proposition seconded?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Does anyone wish to speak on that proposition?
Sir, I was Senator Farnham.
Yes, Senator.
It was also raised, sir, in the chat about the urgency to deal with the safer travel proposition, so
yes,
as soon as possible, because of the uncertainty and disruption it could potentially cause if we don't. I'm not sure when we can agree that with the timing on that, sir, because I very much hope I think it should be the next item on the agenda.
Well, let's deal with the continuation day first and then consider the arrangement for future business if that's appropriate, Senator.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Yes, it is.
Very well. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition to have Friday as a continuation day? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I would just want to say, when we went to 3-week sittings, it was made clear that one of the consequences is that we may need to use Friday as a continuation day. And so now that's coming to fruition, and I think we need to do that rather than just trying to stay late on the Thursday. And if we do have to stay late on the Friday, that's a slightly different situation. But I would support Friday as a continuation day. Thank you, sir.
Very well. Does any other member wish to speak on Friday as a continuation day? No other member wishes to speak. Deputy Martin, do you wish? Deputy Dewbley.
Thank you, sir. I would just ask that in future, if we are facing a debate of this importance, which looks like it is going to go over the 2 continuation days, that we have consideration earlier than this, possibly, but certainly with more notice, so that people can actually consider maybe 1 of 2 choices, because I think in the past we have used Tuesday of the following week as a continuation day, or the Monday of the following week. And it's important for those of us with caring responsibilities that we can properly make arrangements. And also, I just think it's better, it's more efficient if perhaps an email could be sent round with any proposed continuation day in advance, rather than deciding on the hoof like this, so that members can properly consider and make arrangements for any responsibilities that they have.
Very much, Deputies. Any other member wish to speak on the proposal that Friday is a continuation day? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call upon Deputy Martin to respond.
Yes, thank you, sir. And like Deputy Ward, I did know Fridays could be used, and but you can only judge a debate as far as it's going. We've only done the 2 amendments. We haven't even got onto election day yet. I've been sitting here quietly all afternoon thinking, and people are sort of out in the world wanting to know, do I press that button and book my flights? And then we've got the emergencies. So I apologise again to Deputy Doublé and any other member who've got caring. I'm cancelling meetings. It is what it is, and that's fine. I propose let's work the way forward. Friday will be a continuation date if needed, and if we keep our speeches short and we don't keep repeating, it might not be. And if not, and we have to sit Friday until we finish the business that's absolutely needed. Until what time it will be. Thank you, sir.
Very well. I think I'll put this to the vote. I'd ask the greffier to put a vote in the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote. The vote is using Friday for this week as a continuation day.
Sorry, I was just going to, I should have asked, does that mean that there won't be an extension on the Thursday?
No, that's a separate question.
That's a separate question, thank you. I think
that's not been voted on yet. Yes. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted, 38 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstention in the link, and a further 4 votes pour in the chat. Very well, the Assembly will continue on Friday if it doesn't finish its business tomorrow. 2 other points have been raised in the course of the discussion. The first, I think, was as to the ordering of public business, and whether that needs to be taken this evening or not is a matter, of course, for members. And the second is whether we sit late tomorrow evening, whether that needs to be taken this evening or not, as the case may be, is a matter for members. Senator Farnham, do you wish to speak?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like to propose, if I may, that the next item after the item we're dealing with, given the time sensitivity, is the safer travel policy proposition. I'm just trying to find it on the order paper.
P34, I think.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Given the fact that our red, amber, green system is due to commence from the 26th, we really need to agree that, sir, and deal with this proposition as quickly as possible, because islanders, visitors, our transport partners, sir, are on tenterhooks at the moment, wondering what on earth is going to be happening. So it needs to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. So I'd like to propose we take that to the next item after this current item. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Does the member wish to speak on that proposition? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. As chair of the panel that's bringing the proposition, I think we're more than happy to do that. We would have taken it at the beginning if we had the chance, but thank you, sir.
Sure. Does any other member wish to speak on that proposition, which is to take P34, the safer travel policy issue, next after P17? No member wishes to speak. I close the debate. Do you wish to respond to that, Senator Farnham?
No, thank you, sir.
Very well. I think I'll take, if anyone wishes me to take a recorded vote, then we can, but would the people please indicate in the chat if they wish a recorded vote to be taken, otherwise I'll take it as a standing vote. Very well, nobody's indicated a contrary view or wish, therefore this is approved on a standing vote.
Can I propose the, sorry, sir.
Did you wish to say something, Senator?
I was about to propose the adjournment, sir.
Well, the only other question was whether anyone wishes to discuss staying late tomorrow, which was the other point raised. That's a matter that could be considered overnight. It could depend upon how we're going tomorrow, and it might well be that members wish to keep their powder dry until tomorrow morning, but that's a matter for members.
Yes, sir. Could I propose the adjournment, please, sir, and we sleep on the other matter? Thank you.
So,
Deputy Alves?
Thank you, sir. In light of what Deputy Doublé mentioned there with regard to giving people as much notice as possible, I think it would probably be wise to propose sitting later tomorrow now so that people have ample time to put in any arrangements that they need to. Thank you, sir.
To when would you propose the Assembly sit?
So to sit late on Thursday.
Yes, but
tomorrow.
How late? I mean, in a sense, the Assembly just then makes a decision towards the end of the day. Are you suggesting at this point we decide to sit for a further hour, a further 2 hours to finish the item of business then before the Assembly? There are a number of ways in which you can propose that.
Okay, so can I propose that we sit until 6:30 tomorrow, please, sir?
Well, is that seconded?
Yes, I'll second that, sir.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to clarify something, and I thank Deputy Alves for her. I see she's trying to be helpful. So just to clarify, and again, I'm not just speaking for myself, because there are many with caring responsibilities in the Assembly, and I would like to see many more be able to access and be a statesman for those with caring responsibilities. So the ideal situation is having notice of when we're going to decide as a continuation. So if the chair of PPC felt that she could specify something that she was going to propose first thing tomorrow morning, that would be especially helpful, because then in the morning, after I've had conversations about making arrangements, I will know exactly whether I can do that or not, and I will know exactly whether I can vote pour or conch to that suggestion. Yeah, sorry, I hope that helps.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy Pinnell, you've asked to speak.
Yes, thank you, sir. Members will be well aware that I'm not in favour of long speeches. We seem to have had an extraordinary number of them today. If we hadn't, without repetition, we could have finished by today, if not tomorrow. So extending tomorrow night into Friday, I understand caring responsibilities. I have that as well. And I just think that we need to curtail the speeches and not drag it on for another few days. Thank you, sir.
Well, we've already voted to continue until Friday, Deputy. This is about whether people stay late tomorrow until 6:30, which is what is currently proposed by Deputy Alves. If the proposition is not to be withdrawn in the light of the intervention by Deputy Doublé, and I make no observation on that one way or the other, then the Deputy of St John.
Sir, thank you. Yes, I'm concerned that we're considering extending tomorrow evening when in fact we have already got a day set aside next Tuesday for primarily for discussion of sea fisheries. I have in my diary anyway. May that serve as an extension to this session if Friday doesn't see an end to the business?
Well, I have nothing in my diary for next Tuesday. I have to say, I don't know if anybody else does, but no, there's lots of shaking of heads. I'm afraid your diary might not be accurate on the point.
Sir, in light of the comments that have been made, can I withdraw that proposition, please?
Does any member disagree that this proposition can be withdrawn at this point and the matter revisited first thing in the morning?
No, I'm happy, sir. I'm happy with that, but I feel I must clear up the point that Deputy Poynton made about the fish thing. It does have to be dealt with on Friday because it doesn't come into force until 7 days after, which takes it to the 30th of April, which is the very last day. So that's why I push for the Friday, sir, for that. Thank you.
Well, if we're in some difficulty, Deputy Young, then of course you can ask to have it taken earlier in the order of business and not at the very end.
Thank you.
If that's necessary. That's a matter for the Assembly, of course. Deputy Ward?
So may I just say that we have agreed that Friday is an extension day.
Yes.
And it seems logical to me, and for caring duties for those who have them, finish on time tomorrow, and the one day to be extended would be Friday if we need to. That's what, when we went to 3-week sittings, we knew this would arise, and now it's arisen. So I think we can sensibly approach the debates tomorrow, knowing the timescale that we'll be here on Friday. And I think it's better decisions are made if we are here not till very late at night every night. And it's very important decisions that are to come. But if we have to extend Friday, then we have to extend. And if we have to come back after that, then we have to come back. That is the consequence of 3-week sittings. And I think we should be looking to apply that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. No one has indicated that they oppose Deputy Alves withdrawing the proposition at the present time. If anyone does oppose that, could they indicate now? Otherwise, I shall treat that as withdrawn. No, very well, Deputy Alves. I think you have the agreement of the Assembly to withdraw the proposition at this time. Is the adjournment proposed?
It is, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.